Chapter 2449. There were some pills in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court that were standardized pills. Just like the Nine Heavens set, they looked ordinary but were in fact extraordinary. The effect of the Nine Heavens Energy Refining Pill was to aid one's cultivation. Previously, when Chern Zong had become a Fifth Heaven True Disciple, he had received 10 pills. Every 10 years, Chern Zong would receive another 10 pills. Similarly, when one became a first-grade Earth Tao disciple of the Tao Alliance, one would also receive 10 pills every 10 years. When Chern Zong joined Primordial, it was the same. Of course, Primordial was different. When Chern Zong joined Primordial, although he was an official member, he was only an ordinary member, equivalent to a third-grade Earth disciple of the Tao Alliance. The resources enjoyed by the highest-ranking members of Primal Origin were much better. Come to think of it, their normal official members would be able to enter Mount Wuwang and the world of refinement once more. This was something that other factions could not compare to. Therefore, the further one progressed, the more obvious the gap became. Spirit Focus Realm is fine, but in the Divine Manifestation Realm, if one does not have extraordinary talent, the gap between them and the 4 void races and the origin race will be further widened. These were Lin Ming's words, and he deeply understood them. The Tao Alliance had been established for many years, and its foundation was very deep. With the continuous efforts and contributions of the Tao Alliance's ancestors, there were some opportunities in the Tao Alliance. Perhaps they were not as good as the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, but they were still very useful to those in the Spirit Focus Realm and Divine Manifestation Realm. Even those in the Fourth Realm could benefit greatly from them. As a first-grade Earth disciple of the Tao Alliance, Chern Zong was qualified to enjoy most of the opportunities. Those that he could not enjoy were limited by his cultivation level. Once his cultivation level reached a certain level, he would be qualified to enjoy them. To be precise, Lin Ming was Chern Zong's guide. He was the one who had taken a fancy to Chern Zong and strongly recommended Chern Zong. Naturally, as the one who brought Chern Zong into the Tao Alliance, he was responsible for guiding Chern Zong and familiarizing him with everything in the Tao Alliance. This is the scripture repository of our Tao Alliance. The cultivation techniques and secret techniques stored within it were either collected or created by the seniors of our Tao Alliance. Besides that, there are also some miscellaneous notes and cultivation experiences. Lin Ming pointed at an azure tower that was 100 meters tall within the Tao Alliance and said, "When you practice the sword, you can choose sword techniques from there. Those sword techniques are all closely related to the Ninefold True Sword." The Ninefold True Sword of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court is the foundation, the best sword technique to forge a foundation for. It is also an extremely good close combat technique. Therefore, you must not be careless and must grasp its mysteries. Once you break through to the Divine Manifestation Realm, you will be able to practice even more profound and powerful martial arts. As for martial arts manuals, it's enough to choose one of the 3 supreme martial arts manuals of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. There's no need to pay attention to the others. If it's a secret technique, you can choose one. It's up to you. After his explanation, Chern Zong did not immediately enter the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. Instead, he continued to follow Lin Ming. That's the Enlightenment Tower. It can't be compared to the refinement world of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, but it's not bad for you guys. You don't need to reach the Divine Manifestation Realm to enter. You can enter now, Lin Ming said with a smile. After bringing Chern Zong around the Tao Alliance, Lin Ming left and let Chern Zong act on his own. Chern Zong immediately headed towards the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. It looked like an illusion, but it also seemed to be real. It was very mysterious. The Hidden Scriptures Pavilion was 100 meters tall, but it had 5 floors. Each floor was about 20 meters tall. The first floor was filled with miscellaneous note. There were many of them. Chern Zong glanced through them. Some of these notes were some experiences, some of them were local customs, and some of them were records of information. Then, Chunzong walked towards the second floor. The second floor was filled with some cultivation techniques, sword techniques, and secret technique. Apart from that, there were also cultivation experiences left behind by predecessors. After wandering around, Chunzong didn't find anything, so he walked up to the third floor. A first-grade Earth Realm Dao disciple could enter the third floor at most. The third floor also contained cultivation techniques, sword techniques, secret techniques, and cultivation experiences. There were fewer of them than the second floor, but the level was higher. Similarly, Chunzong slowly walked around, carefully looking and searching. Then, he took out an ancient book. He didn't know what material it was made of. It seemed a little rough, but it felt comfortable in his hand. The cultivation techniques, sword techniques, secret techniques, and so on were all in the form of books. The Mystery of Slowness of the Ninefold True Sword. Looking at the words on the cover of the book, Chunzong read. Then, he opened it. A paragraph of text entered his eyes. It was a description of the Ninefold True Sword, and so on, and then the mystery of it. He flipped it open again. Apart from the text, there was also an image. The image was of a white-robed man holding a sword. It was vivid and lifelike. On every page, the white-robed man was practicing with a sword. When combined together, it was a sword technique. Sword techniques and sword techniques were the names of the universe and the void. They were the same in essence. Soon, Chunzong was immersed in it. It was as if he saw a white-robed man holding a sword and practicing a sword technique in front of him. It was the Ninefold True Sword. However, every sword was very slow. The second sword was slower than the first, and the third sword was even slower. However, Chunzong found that although the sword technique was very slow, there was a terrible power condensed in every sword, as if it was accumulating power. Yes, it was accumulating power. The slower it was, the more power it accumulated, and the stronger the power it would explode in the end. The effect of this kind of meditation was not as good as the one in the Sword Palace of the Divine Martial Hall. There was a big difference. However, Chunzong's comprehension was amazing. With the help of the 5 intents, he quickly understood part of the mystery. Not in a hurry to continue, Chunzong put the book back and looked at other things. The Mystery of Ninefold True Sword. The Mystery of Ninefold True Sword's Sharpness. The Mystery of Ninefold True Sword's Swiftness. The Mystery of Ninefold True Sword's Slowness. The Mystery of Ninefold True Sword. The Mystery of Ninefold True Sword. Chunzong found more than 30 mysteries of Ninefold True Sword. Chunzong's eyes lit up. I have understood the mystery of speed, mystery of edge, and mystery of sharpness. Chunzong said to himself, however, I can still observe it. The other mysteries are worth my time. The Ninefold True Sword was the basic sword technique of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. It was not enough to master 1 or 2 mysteries of the basic martial arts. Because it was too simple, it would be easy to be seen through and targeted in a fight with an expert. However, if one could master more mysteries and use them together, there would be more moves, and it would be harder to see through and target. Moreover, the more mysteries one mastered, the more advanced martial arts one would practice in the future, the more solid the foundation would be, and the easier it would be. Chunzong was not in a hurry to choose. He continued to read. In addition to swordsmanship, Chunzong paid attention to the body refining technique. He wanted to see if he could find a powerful body refining technique that was comparable to the annihilation force of the 9th heaven breath gale. However, Chunzong did not find it after a round of searching. He then turned to the secret technique. Since he could not use the supreme Lingwu technique, what he could use was the secret technique of heart flame from the heavenly palace of will. It burned the power of the mind to increase one's strength and speed. Secret techniques of the same type could not be used at the same time. Therefore, Chen Zong did not need a secret technique that could increase one's strength and speed. After all, the secret technique of Heart Flame was closely related to the 33 heavens of will. The higher the level of cultivation, the more obvious the improvement would be. However, what the secret technique of Heart Flame increased was the strength and speed of the body, not the overall strength and speed. Therefore, it did not have a big impact on one's strength. Of course, if there was a secret technique that could increase one's strength and speed, Chen Zong would definitely not let it go. Unfortunately, after a round of searching, there were secret techniques that could increase one's strength and speed. However, there was only one secret technique that could increase one's strength and speed at the same time. After searching for a long time, Chen Zong finally chose a secret technique called enlightening force. This was an enhancement secret technique. After mastering it, one would be able to condense enlightening force in one's body. It could be integrated into one's divine power to strengthen one's divine power and thus increase one's strength. Next, Chen Zong chose a book of cultivation experience. It was a book called Mo Wui's Sword Practice Experience. Finally, Chen Zong finished his selection. Secret Technique Enlightening Force. Mo Wui's Sword Practice Experience. 4 sword techniques. 3 of them were fast, sharp, acute, and the 4th was slow. Moreover, Chen Zong could take it away directly. Speaking of which, there were very few Earth-level Dao disciples in this 5th Heaven Dao Alliance branch palace. After all, Earth-level Dao disciples were at the Spirit Condensation Realm, and the Dao Alliance was made up of the human race. The highest level of the human race came from the 2nd sequence void. There were very few humans who could achieve a 4th level evaluation in the trial ground. There were very few humans who could achieve a 5th level evaluation. At least in the past 100 years, Chen Zong was the first human prodigy to achieve a 5th level evaluation. Although there was a chance to increase one's disciple level in the 9 Heavens Imperial Court, it was not an easy task. Because there were very few of them, Chen Zong could make a better choice. After selecting the secret sword techniques and cultivation experience, Chen Zong left the Sutra Depository. Looking back, the scripture depository still looked like an illusion, but just now, he had really stepped into it and picked out the sword techniques, secret techniques, and so on, and even brought them out. Chen Zong could not understand such a method. At least for now, he could not understand it. The difference between their levels was too big. Dao Enlightenment Tower. Staring at the illusion of the Sutra Depository, Chen Zong narrowed his eyes. I will go to the Dao Enlightenment Tower after I have comprehended the secret sword techniques that I have obtained. Chen Zong left the Dao Alliance and returned to the Heart Sword Peak. After informing Jiao Yi, he entered the secret room in the Heart Sword Palace and continued his closed-door cultivation. This time, Chen Zong did not immediately cultivate the secret sword techniques or the secret sword technique. Instead, he picked up the Book of Cultivation Experience, Mo Wui's Sword Cultivation Experience. From the name, it seemed to be the insights and experiences of a cultivator named Mo Wu Yi who practiced the sword. When Chen Zong looked at the 7 words, he felt a mysterious feeling. It was as if the sword qi was lingering around it. It was as if the 7 words were written with the profoundness of swordsmanship. Taking a deep breath, Chen Zong opened Mo Wu Yi's sword practice book and started to read it carefully. It was as if he was on a pilgrimage. Every word gave Chen Zong the feeling that it contained countless sword qi and mysteries of swordsmanship. It was unfathomable, and every word was like a gem. Soon, Chen Zong was immersed in the various mysteries recorded in the sword practice experience and forgot about everything else. This was like a guide. It was as if an expert in the way of the sword was explaining the mysteries of the way of the sword. Chapter 2450. Mo Wui's insights on sword practice were not about sword techniques, but just his understanding of sword practice. However, the benefits it brought to Chen Zong were obvious. The sword techniques of the universe and the sword techniques of the void had different names, but they were the same in essence. They were common. Other than sword practice insights, there was also Mo Wui's understanding and elaboration of the way of the sword. The first page talked about Mo Wui's background. He came from a second-order void. He loved swords since young and was very talented in sword practice. After he had the chance to enter the universe, he made use of the environment of the universe to further improve his way of the sword. Mo Wui explained the difference between the way of the sword in the void and the way of the sword in the universe. The way of the sword in the void was basically the way of the sword. For example, the illusory way of the sword that Mo Wui had originally comprehended. However, Mo Wui knew that there were thousands of ways of the sword. Although there were many differences, the way of the sword was only a part of the way of the sword. The way of the sword was the most refined and pure. The other ways of the sword were not pure. Impure ways of the sword were just unorthodox ways, not the great way of the sword, not the true way of the sword. The way of the sword was pure and refined. This sentence made Chen Zong's heart skip a beat. An indescribable feeling surged in his heart. The way of the sword was pure and refined. If that was the case, his way of the sword was on the wrong path. Perhaps it was not the wrong path. It was just limited by the environment of the void. It was not as complete as the universe. However, since he had entered the universe and knew about a more profound path, Chen Zong would not ignore it. Not long after, Chen Zong finished reading Mo Wui's insights on sword practice. Every word was deeply imprinted in his mind. He closed the book and closed his eyes. Chen Zong started to meditate. The way of the sword was pure and refined. If that was the case, my way of the sword of the heart was on the wrong path. According to what Senior Mo Wui said, an impure sword Dao is a minor Dao. It doesn't have enough essence, and it doesn't have enough potential. It's easier to get started at the beginning, and it's faster to display its might. However, it's hard to cultivate to the end. Mo Wui used his own sword Dao as an example. That was the illusory sword Dao. It was a sword Dao that combined the illusory Dao and the sword Dao. However, it only contained a small portion of the Dao, and its potential was limited. The illusory sword Dao can be divided into the illusory sword Dao and the illusory sword Dao. According to this, my heart sword Dao can be divided into heart Dao and sword Dao. If that's the case, doesn't that mean I've mastered 3 Daos? Chen Zong's eyes shone brightly. In the void, every cultivator could only master 1 Dao. However, because he took a risk and cultivated both qi cultivation and body refinement at the same time, he managed to master 2 Daos. And now there was hope for him to master another one. Although mastering more Daos wasn't necessarily a good thing, if he could master 1 more Dao and it was still within his control, it would be beneficial for his future development. The power of Dao could be stacked, strengthened, and even fused. Although he couldn't do it now, he might be able to do it in the future. The superposition and integration were different than that of the illusory sword principle and the heart sword principle. That method was just a small part of the 2 kinds of Daos. It was very partial and incomplete. In that case, the next step would be to separate his heart sword Dao into heart Dao and sword Dao. Fortunately, the method to separate them was recorded in the sword cultivation experience. This saved Chen Zong the time to figure it out slowly. Now I'll start to separate them so that the heart sword Dao can become a complete heart Dao and sword Dao, Chen Zong thought to himself and started to cultivate. This method of separation wasn't difficult and wasn't dangerous. It was just time-consuming. Time passed slowly. In addition to dividing the heart sword Dao, Chen Zong also cultivated the Yin Thunder Force and comprehended the 9 real swords' swordsmanship. Among them, Chen Zong had already comprehended the mystery of speed and mystery of sharpness. Moreover, the mystery of sharpness and the mystery of sharpness were directly comprehended together. The 12th sword level was the limit that Chen Zong could reach at the moment. It would be very difficult for him to improve further. The mystery of sharpness was in cutting, while the mystery of sharpness was in penetrating. What Chen Zong focused on comprehending was the mystery of slowness, because speed could be fast or slow. Only when both were combined would it be complete speed. Pure speed was only speed, but its power was limited. However, the mystery of slowness was that although it was slow, it focused on accumulating power. The slower it was, the more power it accumulated. If speed and slowness were combined, when the sword was drawn, it could be fast or slow. It could even be completely combined into the mystery of speed. Not only could it display extremely fast swordsmanship, but it could also accumulate great power. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. Chen Zong had basically grasped the mystery of slowness of the 9 real swords. He had also successfully deduced the 12th sword. However, it was still a little difficult to truly combine it with the mystery of speed. After all, Chen Zong had comprehended the mystery of sharpness separately. He had comprehended the mystery of sharpness together from the beginning. As for the cultivation of the Yin Thunder Force, the progress was relatively slow. This Yin Thunder Force was divided into 3 levels. When the first level was mastered, it could increase the attack power by 10% with the impact of the Thunderbolt Force. When the second level was mastered, it could increase the attack power by 20%. When the third level was mastered, it could increase the attack power by 30%. This kind of increase could be continuously increased. It was the same as the power cultivated by oneself. It was not the kind of explosive power that could only be used a few times or maintained for a short period of time. However, the cultivation of the Yin Thunder Force required absorbing the power of thunderbolts and condensing it in the body. If I go to the Thunder Palace of the 9 great holy palaces, I should be able to cultivate it faster with the help of the environment there. Chen Zong thought to himself. After becoming a first-grade earthly Tao disciple of the Tao Alliance, Chen Zong enjoyed the highest level of cultivation. Naturally, the time he could enter the 9 great holy palaces also increased. Originally, he could enter the 9 great holy palaces every 10 years. Now, he could enter the 9 great holy palaces for 2 years. Of course, the Tao Alliance was unable to obtain the rights to enter the 9 great holy palaces. Only Primordial, the Demon Palace, and the other 3 great powers were qualified. Moreover, even the Demon Palace and the other 3 great powers only had a small share of the 9 great holy palaces. Among the 9 great holy palaces, the Tao Alliance was at the bottom. The 3 great holy palaces did not have the right to interfere. Only the 9 great holy palaces could. However, only first-grade Tao disciples were qualified to enjoy the benefit. Not all of them. Originally, I planned to use that time in the Sword Palace of the Divine Martial Hall. Now I have to split a portion of my time in the Thunder Palace. Chen Zong thought to himself. He immediately came out of seclusion and headed for the Realm Gate Mountain. The Thunder Palace was located in a vast expanse of lightning. It was extremely terrifying. With the power of the Thunder Soul, Chen Zong entered the Thunder Palace. He felt the strong aura and power of the lightning and began to cultivate the Yin Thunder Force. In just 1 day, Chen Zong successfully cultivated the first level of the Yin Thunder Force. He condensed a gray thunderbolt in his body, which was like a shadow. Of course, this was also related to Chen Zong's cultivation in the past half a year. He was only missing the last step. Chen Zong continued to cultivate, trying to break through the second level. The second level was even more difficult. It took him a whole month to cultivate it. He continued to cultivate the third level. Half a year. Chen Zong spent half a year to completely cultivate the Yin Thunder Force. A sword broke through the air. Within the sword light, a gray light flashed like a thunderbolt and pierced through the void. Sure enough, the same amount of energy is consumed. After using the Yin Thunder Force, The power has indeed increased a lot. Chenzong thought to himself. In this way, his strength had been further improved. The third level of the Yin Thunder Force increased the attack power by 30%. Although it was not a lot, it could be used continuously. It was the same as his cultivation power. As for those that could increase their strength even more, they were either secret techniques that were rarer and more advanced, or secret techniques that were more explosive. Since he had cultivated the third level of the Yin Thunder Force, Chenzong did not waste any time and quickly left the Thunder Palace. However, Chenzong did not return. Instead, he went through the Realm Gate to the Hurricane Palace. He wanted to use the environment there to cultivate the Annihilation Force. For the first level, Chenzong was still at the entry level and had not reached the small success stage. He wanted to see if he could use the environment of the Hurricane Palace to reach the small success stage within half a year. If he succeeded, his cultivation power would be even stronger and his overall strength would also increase. Half a year passed. When the time came, Chenzong had no choice but to leave the Hurricane Palace. However, he was happy that the first level of the Annihilation Force had finally broken through the entry level and reached the small success stage. The power of the Cool Breeze Force had doubled. Of course, this did not mean that Chenzong's attack power had doubled. After all, the Cool Breeze Force was only a part of the attack power, not all of it. However, Chenzong's attack power had increased by at least 30%. With my current strength, if I want to defeat the 3 origin race people from more than a year ago, I shouldn't need to use the Sword World. Chenzong said to himself. After all, after more than a year, his strength had improved significantly. As for now, it was hard to say. After all, he was improving and so were others. The only difference was the speed of improvement. Originally, Chenzong had thought that after he defeated the 3 origin race members, other origin race members would come looking for trouble with him and get back at him. However, after more than a year had passed, and Chenzong didn't care too much about it. Even if the origin race people did come looking for him, it would just be a battle. Even if he lost, it was just a loss. It was nothing. Chenzong was very open-minded when it came to winning and losing. It was normal to lose when one's strength was inferior. He just had to work hard and cultivate to catch up. After leaving the Realm Gate Mountain, Chenzong did not return to the Heart Sword Peak. Instead, he went to the Dao Union. This time, Chenzong planned to enter the Dao Enlightenment Tower to comprehend and cultivate properly. He had already reached the point where he could no longer improve in the Yuan underworld realm. At the very least, if he was in the void, but after entering the universe, he realized that even if his cultivation base reached its limit, he could still continue to improve because of cultivation techniques, sword techniques, and so on. If this was known by the cultivators in the void, who knew how shocked they would be. At the same time, while Chenzong was heading to the Dao Union, 7th Wu found an origin race person who had just come out of seclusion in the Origin Division Hall. "Big brother, please help me," 7th Wu said directly to the origin race person. Chapter 2451. An origin tribesman wants to challenge me. Chenzong was slightly surprised when he received the message from Jiao Yi. But it seems like it's been a while. Chenzong had expected to be challenged, but he didn't expect it to be more than a year later. According to the rules of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court, the challenger could only be a disciple of the same generation. In other words, it couldn't be a disciple of the previous generation challenging a disciple of the current generation. That would be against the rules. After all, the previous generation entered the 9 Heavens Imperial Court earlier and cultivated for a longer time, so they were usually stronger. But on the other hand, if a disciple of the current generation was brave enough and strong enough, he could challenge a disciple of the previous generation. Coincidentally, Chenzong met Lin Ming. "What's the name of the origin tribesman who wants to challenge you?" Lin Ming couldn't help but ask. "Shi Zhang," Chenzong replied. "It's him." Lin Ming immediately frowned. Without waiting for Chen Zong to ask, he took the initiative to say, Shi Zhang is considered one of the most outstanding people among this batch of Origin clan members. A year ago, he had already passed the 3rd level of the battle tower. In terms of strength, he should be ranked in the top 10 among this batch of disciples. 3rd level of the battle tower, top 10. Chen Zong couldn't help but look serious. Chen Zong had challenged the battle tower once before, but was defeated in 2 strikes on the 1st level. Now, Chen Zong was confident that he could pass the 1st level, but the 2nd level would be more difficult. As for how difficult it would be, he hadn't tried it yet, so he wasn't sure. As for the 3rd level, the difficulty would increase again. Chen Zong was confident about the 1st level. He wasn't sure about the 2nd level, but it might be possible. As for the 3rd level, based on his current strength, Chen Zong didn't feel confident about it. When is Shi Zhang's challenge? Lin Ming asked again. 10 days later, Chen Zong said. Well, it's okay. Shi Zhang is very strong, there is no doubt about it. The Origin people have a very obvious innate advantage, and this is something that we humans can't compare with, Lin Ming said. Even if he loses, it doesn't matter, as long as he is not afraid to fight. In other words, Lin Ming was not optimistic about Chen Zong's chances either. After all, the West staff was very strong, much stronger than Qi Wu and the other Origin clansmen. Oh right, do you have any questions about your cultivation? Lin Ming changed the topic. He was a 4th realm cultivator after all, while Chen Zong was only at the 2nd realm. The gap between the 2nd realm and the 4th realm was not so easy to bridge. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. No matter how strong a 2nd realm cultivator was, even if they were strong enough to rival a weaker 3rd realm cultivator, they would still be like ants in front of a 4th realm cultivator like you. Senior Lin Ming, I have some questions about body refining, Chen Zong said immediately. Body refining? I've never dabbled in it, nor have I deliberately tried to understand it. Even though Lin Ming was surprised that Chen Zong would ask about the Tao of body refinement, he still replied. However, if you need it, I can recommend you to our Tao Alliance's protector Tai Zhongling. He mainly cultivates in body refinement and has extraordinary attainments. Then I'll have to trouble you, Senior, Chen Zong said immediately. Okay, but Tai Zhongling has been away for a while, and it will be a while before he returns. I'll recommend him to you then, Lin Ming said with a nod and a smile. After bidding farewell to Lin Ming, Chen Zong headed to the Tower of Enlightenment. From the outside, the Tower of Enlightenment looked like an illusion, but after entering, it was as if it was real, and there was no difference at all. It was very strange. Chen Zong wanted to comprehend the way of the sword, so he stepped into the room with the word sword carved on it. The room was very spacious, and there was only a praying mat that emitted bits of silver light. On the wall there was a picture scroll. Chen Zong stepped into the room and carefully observed it. The praying mat was somewhat gorgeous, but other than that, he couldn't feel anything else. The picture scroll hanging on the wall also looked very ordinary. It was white with a few black marks on it, as if someone had casually scribbled on it. Chen Zong looked at the 4 words above the picture scroll and read them aloud, 9-sword picture. But he didn't understand what they meant. Immediately, Chen Zong walked to the praying mat and sat down. His whole body seemed to sink into it, and he became one with the praying mat. A very strange feeling arose spontaneously, and traces of a cool aura spread out from his body. It was like a myriad of streams returning to their origin, and flowed into his spirit sea. All distracting thoughts disappeared in an instant, and they were replaced by a feeling of clarity. An incomparably clear feeling spread out. His mind was clear, and his thoughts were unobstructed. A thought was like an aurora or lightning. With this strange feeling, Chen Zong glanced at the picture scroll in front of him. In an instant, he felt that the picture scroll had changed greatly. The few black ink scratches on it seemed to come alive in an instant, wriggling like dragons and snake. With the white background, it seemed to have transformed into a part of the world in an instant. The few ink scratches were like dragons and snakes dancing, and the wisps of aura emitted an amazing sharpness. Sword chi. The ink dragons and snakes seemed to be condensed by the sword chi. Each wisp contained a kind of unfathomable mystery, and Chen Zong couldn't help but be immersed in it. It was as if Chen Zong had transformed into an ink dragon snake at that instant. He wandered about wantonly in that white world, patrolling in all directions. Chen Zong forgot everything, including himself. Like a dragon, he was unrestrained and carefree. In the beginning, the ink dragon and snake that Chen Zong had turned into was very small and thin. However, as it continued to wander, wisps of sword chi were born out of thin air and constantly condensed, causing the ink dragon and snake to continue to condense and grow. They became stronger and more majestic, gradually approaching the size of the other ink dragons and snakes. Every wisp of sword chi in the ink dragon and snake was gradually transformed from Chen Zong's accumulation on the way of the sword since he embarked on the path of cultivation. This was a kind of polishing, a kind of aggregation, and a kind of transformation that removed the impurities and retained the essences. The transformation was carried out unconsciously. Chen Zong himself didn't know because he was completely immersed in this enlightenment. After an unknown amount of time, the ink dragon and snake grew to their maximum size. They let out a series of resounding roars that reverberated through the heavens and earth. Wisps of sword chi surged around their bodies, as if they were going to tear everything apart. In the next moment, the ink dragon and snake suddenly exploded, turning into countless wisps of sword chi that pierced through the air and suddenly dissipated into the white world. His consciousness also returned in an instant. Chen Zong's body shook unconsciously, and he instantly woke up. After his consciousness returned, Chen Zong was still immersed in the aftertaste for a while before he truly woke up. Once he woke up, Chen Zong felt that he was different. In his body there was an additional force. In other words, the way of the sword of the heart had been successfully separated into the complete way of the heart and way of the sword. It was equivalent to having an additional force of the great way. Way of the heart. Way of the sword. Everything was complete. Then, as Chen Zong's thoughts moved, the power of the way of the heart and the way of the sword instantly overlapped, and their power increased by a lot. Indeed, it's as Emowui said. Chen Zong was secretly excited, and his eyes shone brightly. Overlapping and merging the way of the Great Way was something that many cultivators wanted. However, the prerequisite was that one had to comprehend at least 2 great ways and master the power of 2 great ways. Most cultivators only comprehended and mastered 1 great way. Naturally, there was no need to talk about overlapping or merging. Previously in the trial ground, Mo Luogu overlapped the power of 2 great ways, and his power had also increased significantly. In terms of absolute power, he had surpassed Chen Zong. When he merged the power of 2 great ways into the power of dark destruction, its power increased exponentially. Chen Zong had been thinking about how to overlap the power of 2 great ways that he possessed. However, it was very difficult. It felt as if 2 tigers could not live on the same mountain. The demon tribe and the heavenly human tribe could do it because of their racial talent. Now he could do it too, overlapping the power of the way of heart and the power of the way of the sword. According to Emowui, I can overlap the power of the way of the heart and the power of the way of the sword because they were originally one, but now they are separated, Chen Zong said to himself. But I can't merge them because they were not complete when they were one. 2 types of great Tao powers superimposed, the power multiplied. In other words, Chen Zong's strength increased by several times from the original foundation. The increase from the 3rd level of the Yin Thunder Force and the initial success of the 1st level of the annihilation force of the 9 Heaven Breath Gale. Now it was the combination of the two great ways. The total increase of 90%? No, that was not the case. The 30% increase from the third level of the Een Thunder Force was closely related to one's original attack power. After achieving the initial success of the Clear Wind Force, Chun Zong's attack power had increased by a lot. Naturally, the 30% increase would be more. The same was true for the increase from the power of the Wei. Therefore, in terms of attack power, Chun Zong had definitely increased by more than 2 times compared to before. The effect of a 10% increase or decrease in attack power was still very obvious, not to mention a doubling of the attack power. It was like the impact of 50 kilograms of force and 200 kilograms of force. They were 2 different levels. Has it been 5 days? Chun Zong recovered from his surprise and realized that there were still 5 days before the battle with the original tribe member, Shi Zhang. Then in these 5 days, I will meditate and improve myself as much as possible. Chun Zong thought to himself. He immediately left the Enlightenment Tower and went to the Sutra Depository. Firstly, he wanted to return the secret swordsmanship and cultivation experience that he had borrowed. Secondly, he wanted to choose other swordsmanship and master more of the mysteries of the 9 stacks true sword. When the way of the sword of the heart was separated into the complete way of the heart and the way of the sword became pure. Chun Zong felt that it might be easier for him to comprehend swordsmanship. This time, Chun Zong borrowed 2 swordsmanships from the Sutra Depository. They were the mysteries of the 9 stacks true sword, the mysteries of hardness and the mysteries of softness. When these 2 swordsmanships were cultivated to the extreme, they could be combined to combine hardness and softness. With the mysteries of the 2 swordsmanships, Chun Zong quickly left the Taoist Union and returned to the Heart Sword Peak. He went straight into the Heart Sword Palace and began to meditate. As soon as he meditated, Chun Zong was delighted. Double. Compared to before, the effect of meditating had doubled. Under the 10 intents of mind, the efficiency was really amazing. Even Chun Zong was shocked. Chapter 2452. There were 6 Origin race members in the Death Arena. There were also other races, such as the Demon Tribe and the Celestial Tribe. There were more than 20 of them in total. It was obvious that one of the 6 Origin race members was the leader. That Origin race member had his hands behind his back, and his expression was arrogant. The other 5 Origin race members stood to the side as if they were supporting him. It was as if they were the stars surrounding the moon. Why isn't that human here yet? 7th Wu frowned and said angrily. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he heard about Big Brother Shi Zhang's reputation and felt that he was no match for him. He's afraid of losing and doesn't dare to come. The Origin race members discussed animatedly. The others were also discussing in secret. Don't worry. A day hasn't passed yet. Shi Zhang looked calm and relaxed. He did not show any signs of impatience. In the evening, when the Origin race members were getting more and more impatient, Chun Zong finally arrived. Human, you still dare to come? 7th Wu mocked as soon as he saw Chun Zong. Sorry, I was delayed by my cultivation. Chun Zong ignored the 7th Wu. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on the leader of the Origin clansmen. He clasped his sword and bowed as he spoke in a sincere tone. It's okay. Since you're here, let's start. Shi Zhang smiled and replied unhurriedly. When he found out that Chun Zong had defeated 3 members of the Origin race in a row, he was very surprised. As for defeating people from other races, he didn't care because other races couldn't compare to the Origin race in terms of innate ability. In the universe, only the powerful Origin race could be innately comparable to the Origin race. This was also the reason why he agreed to 7th Wu's challenge to Chun Zong. Otherwise, how could a human from the 3rd sequence void be qualified to fight with him? Everyone quickly retreated to the edge of the death arena but did not leave. This was because Shi Zhang was the one who initiated the challenge. He had the right to decide whether or not to spectate. It seemed that he intended to let others spectate. Chen Zong could not interfere with this. Let's fight. Traces of aura emanated from Shi Zhang's body. The aura was pure and vigorous, just like the aura of the 9 heavens 1000 condensation technique. However, it was much purer and more vigorous than the aura of the Origin clan member that he had defeated earlier. First stage. This West staff had at least cultivated the first layer of the 9 heavens 10,000 essence condensation technique to the great success stage. It was not that easy to break through a small realm in a supreme art. After breaking through, the difference in strength was still very obvious. This Shi Zhang was a disciple who had entered the 9 heavens imperial court at the same time as him. However, compared to the 7 Wu and the other 2, he was much stronger. Unknowingly, Chen Zong's sword intent surged, and a sharp aura spread out. Chen Zong wasn't sure how strong he was now, but he was sure that he was much stronger than when he was still in the void. Although he was still in the same realm, he was definitely much stronger than when he was still in the void. If the current him were to fight the past him, he would only need a single sword strike to kill him. Shi Zhang flipped his hand and took out a dark golden staff. A powerful aura spread out and filled the surroundings, as if it wanted to repel and crush everything. With the staff in his hand, Shi Guang's aura was suffocating, and it also gave Chen Zong a strong pressure. Let's fight. Shi Zhang suddenly lifted the long staff, and a terrifying aura burst out in an instant, like a surging sea. It was vast and mighty, and it impacted everything. Boom! Shi Zhang took a step forward, and as his foot landed, his boundless aura gushed forth like a surging tide. The oppressive pressure caused Chen Zong to feel suffocated. Soon after, the dark golden long staff also smashed down with a loud bang. This strike carried a terrifying force, and it was as if it wanted to smash Chen Zong into pieces with the force of a landslide and tsunami. Chen Zong's eyes flashed. Like a sword, Chen Zong swept out like a gust of wind. He became one with his sword, and his sword was unsheathed. With a flash of extremely sharp sword light, it was as if it could tear everything apart, and it went against the current. Chen Zong's initial success in the clear wind force made his speed faster, and his sword sharper. In addition, the heart sword principle was divided into the complete heart sword principle and the sword principle. The pure sword principle did not have the mystery of the past, but because of its purity, its sharpness was also enhanced. The sword principle's sharpness was determined from its structure. Since the sword principle was the sword principle, it naturally focused on sharpness. The sword carried a strong and mighty force. It directly struck out, and it collided with the dark golden staff without fear. Stupid! How dare you confront brother Shi Zhang head-on? The 3 Origin tribesmen sneered. They had fought Chen Zong more than once, and they naturally knew what Chen Zong was good at. The annihilation force of the 9 heaven breath gale focused on speed and sharpness, but it was not good at strength. Although the 9 heaven 1000 essence condensation technique did not focus on strength, its power was vigorous and pure, and its power was not ordinary. Moreover, a weapon like the staff was better at confronting force with force. Therefore, Chen Zong chose to confront Shi Zhang head-on. In their eyes, it was indeed a stupid thing to do. What they did not know was that Chen Zong did this as an experiment, because the mystery contained in this sword was the mystery of hardness. The mystery of hardness was best at confronting force with force. In the blink of an eye, the dark golden staff struck down with a majestic force, and Chen Zong's sword broke through the air. It was incomparably strong, and it collided directly with Shi Zhang's sword. In an instant, Chen Zong only felt the longsword in his hand tremble violently. The body of the sword bent in an instant. The frightening and direct power was incomparably vigorous and pure. It directly passed through the body of the sword and struck him, causing the wrist that was holding the sword to tremble. Instantly, it became numb. His arm also felt as though it was about to break. If Chen Zong had not refined his body and had a strong physique, he would have been seriously injured by this blow. The staff paused and bounced back. I can't believe he blocked it. West's staff was secretly surprised. He was very clear about the power of his staff. Soon after, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. The staff that had been bounced up suddenly fell down again. The interval was very short, and the second blow fell down. Chen Zong's expression changed. He waved his sword again, but this time, the aura of the sword was completely different. The mystery of softness. The mystery of softness was not suitable for confronting force with force, but it could lead and weaken the opponent. Chen Zong exerted the mystery of softness to the extreme, causing the falling dark golden staff to deviate slightly. Then, the sword suddenly burst out at an astonishing speed. It was extremely fast, and the mystery of speed was clearly displayed. The sword was like a flash of lightning, breaking through the air in an instant. Shi Zhang was secretly shocked, but he did not lose his composure. In an instant, he operated the staff at will and suddenly raised it up, and then stabbed it toward Chen Zong. It burst out a terrible and direct power like a dragon out of the water. Facing Chen Zong's sword, Shi Zhang did not have the slightest intention of resisting. Instead, he wanted to exchange injury for injury and life for life. But Shi Zhang was confident. Although Chen Zong's sword was fast and its power was not weak, it might not be able to kill him. After all, Chen Zong's protective power was very strong, and his own staff was very powerful. Once it hit Chen Zong, it would explode in an instant and directly kill Chen Zong, or at least severely injure him. Shi Zhang's killing method was very shocking, and it surprised Chen Zong. It was not at all comparable to Qi Wu and the other original clansmen. For this staff, Chen Zong could only retreat or block it with his sword. No matter what, he could not continue to attack Shi Zhang, unless he really wanted to exchange injury for injury. When the staff came crashing down, Chen Zong could keenly feel the power contained in it. It was so shocking that it could seriously injure him. At this critical moment, Chen Zong took a step back and put some distance between them. At this distance, the staff could still hit Chen Zong, but it would weaken some of its power. At the same time, Chen Zong's sword changed in an instant. It changed from the mystery of speed to the mystery of strength, and slashed directly at the staff. The moment the long sword hit the staff, it immediately changed into the mystery of softness, dissipating the power, guiding it and slightly deflecting it. In addition to the mystery of softness, Chen Zong also integrated the mystery of slowness. The mystery of softness could guide and dissipate the power, while the mystery of slowness could take advantage of the opportunity to accumulate power. Then, it changed into the mystery of speed, and he attacked again. Because of the mystery of slowness, this sword was not only fast, but also powerful. Retreat. Without hesitation, Shi Zhang retreated in an instant. Because he felt a threat from this sword, an obvious threat. It might not be able to kill him, but it was enough to injure him and affect his ability to exert his strength. What really surprised Shi Zhang was Chen Zong's reaction to his attack. It was completely beyond his expectations, and it also showed Chen Zong's amazing ability to adapt in the face of danger. This ability was closely related to not only talent, but also acquired experience. Amazing! Even Shi Zhang was amazed. For a moment, he was full of fighting spirit. If he had only been curious when he fought with Chen Zong earlier, then now, he was filled with a real fighting spirit. The fighting spirit that was bursting out caused Shi Zhang's aura to soar several times in an instant. Human, you are qualified to make me use all my strength. Shi Zhang's voice became more and more vigorous. It turned out that Shi Zhang had only used part of his strength, while Chen Zong had used all his strength. Of course, this was without using the Yin Thunder Force, the superposition of the Way of Heart, and the full strength of Sword Principle. All my strength. Chen Zong muttered to himself. His eyes became brighter and sharper. His body flashed, and he took a few steps forward like a flash of lightning. He took the initiative to attack. His sword broke through the air, and a flash of gray lightning flashed in the sword light. Chen Zong directly used the Yin Thunder Force, which made the power of the sword 30% stronger. The power increased by 30%, so the threat was naturally greater. However, Shi Zhang, who had used all his strength, did not dodge. Instead, he raised the dark golden long staff and smashed it down again. The moment the long staff smashed down, the body of the staff seemed to be bent. The heavy pressure pressed down in an instant as if it could break the earth. Chen Zong felt that under this staff, he would be smashed into pieces. The shadow of the staff was like a mountain, smashing everything. He could not block it. Chen Zong knew that he wouldn't be able to block this strike. Even if he used superb skills like just now, it would still be difficult to block it. This was because the power of this strike was too strong. He was afraid that his attack would be destroyed if he came into direct contact with it. Set a small goal first, such as 1 second to remember. Book Guest House Mobile Edition. Chapter 2453. Everyone, the Sixth Dao's grandmother has passed away. The Sixth Dao has to send her off tonight. Tomorrow's update will be late. Fight. Fierce fight. Incomparably fierce fight. With the West staff in his hand, every strike carried a majestic force. It was so powerful that it was as if a mountain was crushing everything. It posed a great threat to Chen Zong. However, Chen Zong was not afraid at all. He directly increased his speed to the extreme and activated the Yin Thunder Force. He even combined the power of the Path of Heart and the power of the Sword Principle. He went all out. Even so, Chen Zong could not do anything to West's staff. Instead, he kept dodging under West's staff's attack. He relied on his superb swordsmanship and rich combat experience to contend with West's staff. That was how he managed to stay undefeated. So powerful! Chen Zong could not help but be secretly surprised. This primitive named West's staff was indeed too powerful. Although his combat experience was not as good as his adaptability was also inferior, and his martial arts were not as good as his swordsmanship, his strength was too strong. He was completely superior to Chen Zong. He could suppress or even crush Chen Zong in a head-on confrontation. This was the difference in strength. Chen Zong was surprised, but he did not know that West's staff was also very surprised. Although West's staff did not use any secret techniques, he had already activated all of his strength. This kind of strength was very powerful, and when combined with his staff techniques, it was extremely powerful and could cover all directions. Even so, he still could not defeat his opponent. It was a tug-of-war. His opponent was extremely fast, but that was not the point, because he had encountered opponents with fast speed before. The point was that his opponent was very experienced in combat. His adaptability was amazing, and his swordsmanship was superb. His attainments in martial arts were not comparable to West's staff. Excited. The more he fought, the more excited West's staff was. It was hard to imagine that this was a human from the third sequence void. On the contrary, he seemed to be a native of the universe. In terms of strength, this human is not as strong as me. I can use my strength to fight a war of attrition and exhaust him to death. As Shi Zhang attacked, he thought to himself, however, this is not the victory I want. What I want is an absolute victory, a crushing victory. Only then will I be satisfied. With a change of thought, an incomparably vigorous aura suddenly erupted from Shi Zhang's body. Rumbling sounds shook the heavens and the earth, as if the sea was flowing, impacting everything. It was incomparably tyrannical and shocking. Chen Zong's expression changed involuntarily. Secret technique. Shi Zhang activated a secret technique, and his power immediately increased explosively. Boom! Another staff strike was launched. This time, it was like a dark golden mountain pressing down from the sky, bringing with it a terrifying force of billions of pounds, shattering everything. Pressure. The incomparably heavy pressure fell from the sky, suffocating Chen Zong. So powerful. Very strong. Compared to before, the power of this strike had increased by at least 50%. What a terrifying secret technique. Erupt. Without hesitation, Chen Zong immediately ignited the heart fire. Under the 15 heart palaces, the heart fire immediately increased Chen Zong's strength and speed by 15%. Of course, this did not mean that Chen Zong's true strength and speed could be increased by 15%. After all, Chen Zong was using the strength of Qi-refining Dao, so the increase in his body was limited. However, it still increased Chen Zong's overall strength by 30%. Retreat. The 30% increase in speed allowed Chen Zong to move even faster. He retreated rapidly, and at the same time, he raised his sword and slashed out a sword aura. The sword aura was shattered by the long staff. After the long staff fell, Shi Zhang's arms suddenly blasted forward with endless divine power. The impact was like a violent wave, destroying everything in its path. The power of this attack was too shocking. Moreover, it covered a large area. Chen Zong had to continue retreating. He pushed his speed to the extreme and quickly went around it, intending to face the attack from the side. However, Shi Zhang swung his long staff and rolled up a dark golden staff shadow, which roared with the power of 10,000 tons. It directly covered a large area. Unreasonable. This method was very unreasonable. It was meant to be suppressed. Slash. Chen Zong shouted in a low voice. He did not retreat this time. Instead, his body swayed, and he took small quick steps, activating the sharpness to the extreme. The mysterious 12th sword of the ninefold true sword of sharpness. Kill. All the power was integrated into the sword. It directly slashed out, tearing apart the void and the oncoming staff shadow. With an irresistible force, the body and sword became one. He quickly rushed forward, approaching Shi Zhang in an astonishing and indomitable manner. Shi Zhang was secretly shocked by the sharpness. The sharpness under the pure sword Dao seemed to have received some kind of enhancement. Looks like I have no choice but to bring out my full strength. Shi Zhang suddenly shouted. What he said shocked everyone. The strength that he had displayed was already very terrifying. Seventh Wu and the other Origin people could not resist at all. Of course, they were also shocked by Chen Zong's strength. The speed of his improvement was much faster than theirs. Was he really a human from the third sequence void? Was he not an Origin person who had been mistaken? Hearing Shi Zhang's words, Chen Zong was also secretly shocked. However, he did not think that Shi Zhang was bluffing, because at that moment, an extremely terrifying aura erupted from Shi Zhang's body. Vigorous. Heavy. It was an aura that seemed to suppress everything. Its power was unparalleled. Chen Zong seemed to see a khaki-colored pattern appear behind Shi Zhang. It instantly sank into the dark golden staff in Shi Zhang's hand. The vigorous and heavy aura erupted in this way. Boom! The staff struck down. The staff seemed to have expanded from the thickness of an arm to 10 meters in an instant. It directly covered a large area. The dark golden color looked even more vigorous and heavy. When it struck down, it seemed to shatter everything and make the earth collapse. The impact of the staff's power doubled again. Doubled. It had doubled again. It was too terrifying. The staff's power had been increased by 50%, and now it had doubled again. The terrifying and direct power directly suppressed the void below. It was madly suppressed, like a loose cotton being directly squeezed into steel. Chen Zong was also greatly suppressed. He was instantly restrained and could not move. Burst. Although Chen Zong immediately burst out and brandished his sharp sword to split the invisible pressure, the 10-meter-thick staff shadow had already bombarded him. In a hurry, Chen Zong turned into a gust of wind and immediately squeezed out through the gap created by the sword. He immediately avoided the staff. When the staff landed, it stirred up an extremely violent wind and roared. The continuous waves were endless. The entire death battle arena was shaking. The spectators were even more horrified. "What is that?" someone exclaimed. Everyone had seen the khaki-colored pattern just now. "Dao pattern," Seventh Wu muttered to himself. Then, he was very excited. "Dao pattern. Brother Shizhang has condensed a Dao pattern. He is indeed the top genius of our origin tribe." The other two origin tribe members were also very excited and surprised. Only those who have reached the third realm can truly comprehend Dao patterns. It is extremely difficult to comprehend the second realm. There are only 3 of us in this batch of origin tribe disciples. Now, Brother Shizhang is one more. Under the Dao pattern, Shizhang's strength was pushed to the extreme. It was extremely terrifying. The power of each staff strike was extremely terrifying. It gave people the feeling that they would be injured if they touched it. Chen Zong could only use his speed to the extreme. After dodging, he activated Sword World. However, under Sword World, the sword light condensed and could not get close to Shizhang. Instead, it was shattered again and again. His strength was not as vigorous as Shizhang's. Under the constant consumption, he gradually ran out of strength. Pressure. Chen Zong was constantly pressured by Shizhang. He compressed the space to dodge. He could not do anything to Shizhang with Sword World alone. Hong. Another strike of the staff arrived. This time, Chen Zong was finally unable to completely avoid it. Just by being affected, Chen Zong felt half of his body go completely numb. He lost consciousness, he was severely injured, and the Sword World was unable to continue. In such a situation, with another strike, he could not block or dodge it, and was directly killed. Defeated. Soon, Chen Zong came back to life. Recalling the power of that staff strike, he was still shocked. "You are very strong. I am not your opponent now," Chen Zong said. He admitted that he was not as strong as Shizhang. He took out 100 Cosmos God crystals and gave them to Shizhang. "You are not weak either." Shizhang did not mock Chen Zong. Instead, he said, "If I had not grasped Dao patterns, the outcome of this battle would have been hard to predict. A defeat is a defeat." Chen Zong smiled. "It was just a defeat. It was nothing." What is a Dao pattern? There was no such thing as a Dao pattern in the void. Dao patterns are also called Great Dao God patterns. It is a sign that one has comprehended a great Dao. Shizhang did not hide anything. He answered straightforwardly, "Generally, only those who have reached the third realm can comprehend a great Dao and condense Dao patterns. Many thanks." After saying that, Chen Zong's figure quickly faded and disappeared. He left the deathmatch arena. Although he lost this battle, he gained a lot. "Dao patterns," Chen Zong said inwardly. He quickly went to the Dao Union. This time, he was going to use other sword techniques to comprehend the mysteries. There was not enough time to enter the 9 sacred palaces. The refinement path world could not be entered because one's cultivation level was not high enough. The only place he could go was Mount Wuang. Chen Zong planned to go to the Dao Union to borrow some sword techniques before going to Mount Wuang. After that, he would challenge the battle tower. As for the Dao pattern, he did not have any ideas to speak of and could not find any clues. However, he could ask Senior Lin Ming for guidance. When he arrived at the Dao Union, Chen Zong found Lin Ming and asked for advice on the Dao pattern. "Dao patterns? I don't have any good ideas. You can only rely on yourself. You are quite talented in the sword Dao. Practice the sword and comprehend it. You may have some hope," Lin Ming suggested. After all, Dao patterns could only be comprehended and grasped at the third realm. It was too difficult to grasp them at the second realm. There was no good way to do so. One could only rely on oneself. When the opportunity came, one would naturally be able to comprehend and grasp them. However, the possibility of that happening was too low. After returning the previous sword techniques, Chen Zong chose a few more sword techniques to take with him. Then, he quickly went to the Realm Gate Mountain. Senior He, I want to go to Mount Wuang. Chen Zong bowed to Senior He and said, Go. Senior He waved his hand and activated a realm gate. Chen Zong turned and stepped into the realm gate. He disappeared. Senior He also disappeared. After stepping into the realm gate, Chen Zong continued forward. Just like before, there was no strange feeling. After stepping out of the realm gate, a mountain appeared in front of him. Chapter 2454. I'm back. Here's the first update. Mount Wuang was a mountain whose peak could not be seen, so no one knew how high it was. Mount Wuang was divided into 4 parts. The foot of the mountain, the middle of the mountain, the top of the mountain, and the middle of the mountain. Chen Zong was only in the spirit condensation realm, so he could only stay at the foot of the mountain. When Chen Zong appeared at the foot of the mountain, he immediately felt an invisible force rushing toward him from all directions. The force was silent, but it carried with it an indescribable pressure, as if it wanted to crush Chen Zong's spiritual sea. Divine Decree. Chen Zong's heart skipped a beat. The so-called divine decree was the spiritual will. From the perspective of an ordinary person, it was the will, but for a powerful cultivator, it involved the spiritual soul. Of course, it was not much, and it was mainly the will. Of course, the will itself was one with the spirit and could not be separated from the spiritual soul. It was an extension and a symbiosis, so it was called the spiritual will or divine decree for short. However, the divine decree and the spiritual soul were not the same, and they were different. A powerful spiritual soul did not mean that the divine decree was powerful. It only meant that one had great potential, and a powerful divine decree did not mean that the spiritual soul was powerful. It could only be said that one had experienced many hardships to become powerful. In the void where Chen Zong came from, there was no such thing as divine decree. Or rather, there was no such thing as refining the divine decree. Everything depended on one's own experience to slowly strengthen oneself. The invisible divine decree rushed over and directly hit Chen Zong's divine decree. Chen Zong felt his own divine decree tremble, and it resisted the attack. As it resisted, Chen Zong's spiritual will was constantly being consumed, but there was a trace of extremely pure divine decree that quietly merged with Chen Zong's divine decree, replenishing the divine decree that Chen Zong had consumed. It formed a cycle, and thus had the effect of refining and sharpening. Chen Zong could stay here for a month. Because of the Heart Sutra, Chen Zong did not need to focus on controlling the divine intent to refine it. He only needed to focus on it. The rest of the divine intent could be used for other things. For example, when cultivating the annihilation force of the 9 heavens breath gale, Chen Zong immediately received the impact of the divine will to refine his divine will while cultivating the martial art starting technique. Perhaps the effect of cultivating the martial art starting technique was not as good as cultivating in the Hurricane Hall or even the Heart Sword Peak, but there was still some effect. Many a little makes an ocean. After that, Chen Zong withdrew the sword techniques he'd obtained from the Tao Alliance's scripture repository and started to comprehend them. Tempering the divine will, cultivating cultivation techniques, comprehending sword arts, and comprehending the sword Tao. Chen Zong was multitasking at the same time, which was astonishing. Furthermore, the effect of the One Heart Sutra was not something that could be compared to multitasking. After all, even though multitasking was multitasking, there would still be some side effects. It would cause one to be unable to do their best and achieve the best effect every time. At the very least, it would be reduced by half. However, the One Heart Sutra was different. It directly achieved the best effect. If others knew that Chen Zong had such an ability, How shocked would they be? Moreover, Chun Zong could also activate the 10 intents of mind. The effect of comprehending the 10 intents of mind was even more terrifying. One day, when Chun Zong cultivated the 3 intents of mind to the 3rd level of the One Heart Sutra, the effect would be even more shocking. Unfortunately, Chun Zong's current cultivation level could only reach the 15th level of the 33 heavens of mind. Otherwise, the more he cultivated, the stronger Chun Zong's mental strength would be, his recovery speed would be faster, and he would be able to maintain the 10 intents of mind for a longer period of time. It was worth mentioning that after leaving that side of the void, Chun Zong's title from the Heavenly Will Palace's titled stele also disappeared. Otherwise, it would be even more shocking. Time passed slowly. Chun Zong's divine will unknowingly became stronger. His comprehension of swordsmanship also deepened. However, his progress in the cultivation of the annihilation force of the 9 heaven breath gale was not obvious. Firstly, it was limited by the cultivation environment. Secondly, there were no resources. In other words, there were no 9 heaven life-refining elixirs to use. Soon, a month had passed. Chun Zong felt a strong repulsive force. He was directly expelled and appeared outside Mount Wuong. Has a month passed? Chun Zong came back to his senses. It felt so fast. It seemed that he had just entered not long ago. Feeling it, Chun Zong could feel that his divine will seemed to be much stronger. However, he did not know how much stronger it was. After all, the power of the divine will was too intangible. What were the benefits of the strengthening of the divine will? There were many benefits. It was not easy to be confused, and it was not easy to be influenced by the outside world. I'll go to the 3 great trial grounds now and try my luck. Chun Zong thought to himself as his eyes lit up, the battle tower, the 1,000 illusions pavilion, and the 10,000 slaughter sea. If I can pass the 3rd floor of all of them, I'll be able to enter the secret pavilion and choose a supreme secret art to cultivate. That was right. This was the rule of the 9 heavens imperial court. Any true disciple who had just joined the 9 heavens imperial court could choose a supreme martial art formula or a supreme secret technique to cultivate in the secret pavilion for free. However, almost all true disciples would choose a supreme martial art formula because martial arts formulas were their fundamental strength. One secret technique was enough. It was impossible to choose 2 as they would conflict with each other. This was common knowledge in cultivation, unless one separated chi cultivation and body cultivation. However, the 3 great supreme secret techniques were very attractive. Everyone in the 9 heavens imperial court wanted to cultivate them. Unfortunately, there was no way to do so for free. There were only 2 ways to cultivate the supreme secret technique. The first was to make a great contribution and be rewarded. The second was to go to the 3 great trial grounds and pass the 3rd level or the 3rd stage. Only then would one be qualified to enter the secret pavilion and choose a supreme secret technique or supreme secret technique. Chun Zong did not need the secret technique, but Chun Zong wanted the supreme secret technique. Go. In front of the battle tower, Chun Zong ignored the others and stepped in directly. He was still the same saber-wielding man from back then. As he took a step forward, his body swept like a gust of wind. His saber cut through the air with terrifying power and suddenly slashed down. Previously, Chun Zong could not even react to this attack. But now, Chun Zong saw this attack clearly. He dodged in a flash, but the saber did not stop at all when it came down. It suddenly flipped and cut across the air. Saber after saber, a dense storm of saber light rolled up, sweeping over in a violent manner. It had to be said that this armored man was still very strong. In the void where he came from, he would be considered invincible in the Yuan underworld realm. He would probably be able to contend against a weaker transcendent realm cultivator. Previously, Chun Zong had been defeated by 2 saber moves, but he had not been able to see anything. Now, however, Chun Zong could deal with it calmly. Furthermore, he could use this armored man to hone the few sword techniques that he had just comprehended. Mystery of hardness, mystery of slowness, mystery of lightness, mystery of gravity. When it was about time, Chunzong stabbed out with his sword. This move seemed very slow, but there was also a sense of heaviness to it, as if it contained terrifying power. Chunzong had combined the profundities of slow and heavy that he had just comprehended with this sword strike. The mystery of slowness was accumulating power, and the mystery of gravity was powerful. When combined, the power was even more tyrannical. Sword. The sword directly shattered the opponent's saber light and killed him like a hot knife through butter. Then, Chunzong entered the second level. On the second level, there was also an armored man, but he was holding a long spear in both hands. The body of the spear shook and instantly rotated at high speed. As his body moved, it carried an extremely terrifying power and stabbed out fiercely. It was like a venomous dragon coming out of its cave. Its speed was fast, and it contained extremely terrifying power. This kind of power was very terrifying. Its fundamental power was not inferior to Chunzong's, who had cultivated a supreme technique. It was much more tyrannical than the armored man on the first level. Chunzong was a little excited. He immediately drew his sword and engaged in a fierce battle with the armored man. The fierce battle was also a way to hone himself and allow Chunzong to have a deeper understanding of swordsmanship. Swordsmanship was a method of meditation, and actual combat was also a method of improvement. The combination of the two was the most effective. Chunzong also realized that different mysteries could be combined with each other. The key was how he applied them. It was like breaking them up and then reassembling them. For example, the mystery of slowness and quickness was not necessarily a combination of slowness and quickness. The mystery of quickness could be combined with the mystery of lightness to further enhance the speed. The mystery of slowness could be combined with the mystery of gravity. When accumulating power, the power would be even stronger. How to apply and combine them depended on his ability. He had to think and try. Actual combat was an excellent test. Chunzong's mind was very fast. Especially with the help of the Heart Sutra, he could comprehend while fighting. He could cultivate and fight at the same time. This kind of improvement was even more amazing. The sword pierced through the air. It was fast, and extremely light, as if it was weightless. In addition to combining different mysteries, Chunzong also tried to use them alternately. For example, when he was extremely fast and was about to hit the target, he would switch to a combination of other mysteries to increase the power, and so on. Carefree. This feeling was incomparably carefree. He was defeated again and entered the third level. The opponent on the third level was wielding a sword. The sword pressure was terrifying to the extreme, causing Chunzong's expression to change drastically. Powerful, extremely powerful. Chunzong knew that he was inferior to his opponent in terms of strength. In terms of cultivation strength, his opponent had at least cultivated the first layer of the Supreme Skill Sutra to the realm of great accomplishment. In other aspects, he was not weak at all. Coupled with his powerful body, he was even more frightening. One must know that this battle tower belonged to the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. The challenges here were initially targeted at the Origin clan. Therefore, the opponents here were all using the Origin clan as a reference. The opponent on the third level gave Chunzong a lot of pressure. What his opponent used was also the Nine Heavens' true sword. All kinds of mysteries were ever-changing, which inspired Chunzong even more. Thunder Force. Heart Dao and Sword Dao superimposed. Heart Fire Burn. Chunzong unleashed his strongest strength and fought wildly with his opponent. Relying on his superb swordsmanship, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position for a while. After honing his swordsmanship to the extreme, Chunzong opened the sword world. Relying on the power of the sword world, he continuously exhausted his opponent. He also took out the 9 Heavens Soldier sword and attacked at close range. With their cooperation, he finally defeated and killed the sword-wielding man. I wonder how strong the opponent on the 4th level is? Thinking to himself, Chen Zong stepped into the 4th level without hesitation. He might not be able to pass, but he could first experience the strength of the opponent on the 4th level and see how strong he was. Chapter 2455. Second update. So strong. Outside the battle tower, Chen Zong was shocked. The opponent on the 4th floor was too strong, and he was no match for him at all. That kind of strength was not only reflected in strength, but also in killing technique. It was as if he was an expert who had experienced countless battles. In short, with his current strength, even if he activated the sword world, he would not be able to pass through. He felt that the opponent was even stronger than the West staff that had activated the Dao pattern. Chen Zong did not know if he could pass through. After all, the opponent's cultivation was the same as his. The higher his cultivation, the higher his opponent's cultivation. However, under the same cultivation, the other aspects were constantly improving, making the overall strength stronger. To put it bluntly, it was fighting above one's cultivation level. Every additional floor meant that the opponent would be stronger. Even if I cultivate the clear wind technique to the greater success stage, I'm still not his opponent. If I cultivate it to the perfection stage, I wonder if I can defeat him? Chen Zong thought to himself as he left. This time, he was heading to the 1000 Fantasy Building. The 1000 Fantasy Building was different from the Battle Tower. The Battle Tower tested one's strength through direct combat, while the 1000 Fantasy Building tested one's divine will. The 1000 Fantasy Building seemed to stand between the real and the illusory. It was very strange. If one looked at it a few more times, they would have a feeling that it was difficult to distinguish between reality and illusion. Stepping into the first floor of the 1000 Fantasy Building, Chen Zong immediately felt a tyrannical force coming from all directions. It was invisible, colorless, and formless. It was silent and difficult to sense. In just an instant, with his extremely sharp senses, he seemed to feel that there was an invisible force silently spreading out. It ignored all obstacles and directly entered his spirit sea. In an instant, Chen Zong felt that everything around him was changing. Illusion. The secret of the 1000 Fantasy Building was to create illusions. In order to resist illusions, one had to rely on one's own divine will. Of course, some treasures could resist illusions, but in the 1000 Fantasy Building, one could only rely on one's divine will. This level of illusion was unable to affect Chen Zong. After experiencing it for a while, Chen Zong broke through it and entered the second floor. The second floor was also an illusion, but it was much more advanced than the first floor. However, it was still unable to affect Chen Zong. He broke through it and entered the third floor. The intensity of the illusions on the third floor had increased significantly, and it was enough to affect Chen Zong. However, it was only an effect. Chen Zong continued to observe the illusions, and in the end, he managed to break through them with his powerful divine will. It feels even easier than challenging the battle pagoda. Chen Zong couldn't help but muse, let's try the 4th level. In theory, the 1000 Fantasy Building, the 1000 Fantasy Building, and the 1000 Slaughter Sea. Maybe they could pass the 3rd floor of the battle tower, but that didn't mean they could pass the 3rd floor of the 1000 Illusions Tower. For example, Shi Zhang was very strong. He had passed the 3rd floor of the battle tower a long time ago, but he hadn't passed the 3rd floor of the 1000 Illusions Tower. Divine will was not absolutely related to one's strength. A person with a strong divine will might not be very strong. On the other hand, a person with a weak divine will might not be weak. The strength of one's divine will was not only related to one's spiritual soul, but also to one's training. Chen Zong's experience was very rich. He had been as weak as a speck of dust. He had experienced many hardships and grew up continuously. The training of his spiritual will was very shocking. Coupled with the month of training in Mount Wuang, it had improved even further. The fourth floor of the 1,000 Fantasy Building. The illusion's strength increased again, and the level of increase was even more shocking. The gap was greater than the gap between the second floor and the third floor. The fourth floor's illusion was naturally a real threat to Chen Zong. However, it was only a threat. It could not completely trap Chen Zong and make him fail. Time passed slowly. Break! A low roar that sounded like thunder instantly exploded. In the next breath, there seemed to be an invisible force that was filled with astonishing power erupting from between Chen Zong's eyebrows. It rushed in all directions, and the illusion immediately collapsed and disintegrated. I've passed the fourth floor. Chen Zong was secretly overjoyed, but he also knew that the reason why his divine will was so strong was closely related to his past experiences. Then, what about the fifth floor? Chen Zong thought to himself. However, he did not rush in recklessly. Instead, he recovered his divine will first. From the first floor to the fourth floor, he had used up more than 90% of his divine will. It was impossible for him to pass the fifth floor. When his divine will was fully recovered, Chen Zong stepped into the fifth floor. As soon as he entered the fifth floor, Chen Zong immediately fell into the illusion. This is an illusion. I have to block it. Chen Zong used his divine will to defend himself. He reminded himself not to be fooled. However, the illusion on the fifth floor was too strong. Chen Zong's divine will was consumed rapidly. In the end, he fell into the illusion. Once he fell into the illusion, it would be judged as a failure if he could not break free from it after a while. In terms of divine will, I'm more outstanding. Chen Zong appeared outside the 1,000 Illusions house and said to himself. Divine will was one of the aspects that he excelled in. It was a pity that divine will was mainly used to strengthen one's will and resist external disturbances and illusions. It could not directly increase one's strength. No, the universe was so vast. There might be some methods related to divine will. He could ask Senior Lin Ming to teach him in the future. Of the 3 trial grounds, there was only one left, the 10,000 kills sea. The nature of the 10,000 kills sea was similar to the battle tower. However, there was a big difference. The battle tower was a one-on-one battle, while the 10,000 kills sea was a one-on-one battle. On the first floor of the 10,000 kills sea, 10 figures appeared and immediately attacked. Chen Zong drew his sword to meet them. As soon as they started fighting, Chen Zong realized that the 10 people on the first floor of the 10,000 kills sea were not as strong as the armored men on the first floor of the battle tower. However, when the 10 of them worked together, their attacks came from all directions. They were dense and continuous, making one feel overwhelmed. The battle tower was a one-on-one battle, while the 10,000 kills sea was a one-on-one battle. It was the embodiment of one's ability to fight in groups. The threat of the 10 people working together was not inferior to that of the first floor of the battle tower. However, it was not the same. The nature of the two was different. After getting used to it, Chen Zong quickly defeated the 10 people, passed the first floor, and entered the second floor. The opponents on the second floor increased to 50 people, and each of them had increased in strength. It was more difficult. Fight. Fierce battle. Chen Zong also used these 50 opponents to sharpen his swordsmanship, constantly improving his control and application of swordsmanship. After defeating them and entering the third floor, the number of opponents increased to 100. The fierce battle was endless. Chen Zong was under great pressure, almost suffocating. This level of difficulty seemed to be even higher than the third floor of the battle tower. Of course, there was a difference between the two. The strength of the third floor of the battle tower might not be able to deal with the siege of the third floor of the 10,000 kills sea. However, the strength of the third floor of the battle tower might not be able to match the strength of the third floor of the battle tower. It was just like how some people were good at strength and some people were good at speed. Chen Zong exerted his strength to the limit, and also exerted his swordsmanship to the extreme. Under the 5 wills of the heart, his swordsmanship was improving at every moment. It was amazing. Even if this improvement was difficult to detect bit by bit, it would accumulate like water droplets accumulating. Eventually, it would become a puddle, then a pond, and finally a qualitative change. After passing the 3rd floor, Chen Zong recovered his strength and tried to challenge the 4th floor. The number of opponents on the 4th floor increased again. There were now 200 of them, and their individual strength was stronger than on the 3rd floor. Although they were not as strong as Chen Zong, with 200 people working together, it was extremely terrifying. Fight. Fierce battle. But in the end, Chen Zong was defeated after killing 50 opponents. The pressure was too great and the threat was too great. The 3rd floor of the battle tower, the 3rd floor of the 10,000 kills sea, and the 4th floor of the 1,000 illusions house. Chen Zong was secretly excited. I can finally enter the secret pavilion to choose a supreme secret technique. There were 3 supreme secret techniques, namely the 9-fold melee, the 9 mysterious protection technique, and the 9 void escape technique. They represented attack, defense, and speed. Without hesitation, Chen Zong made his choice. He chose the 9-fold melee. Although all of them were important, Chen Zong's preference was to focus on attack and destroy everything. What a pity! If only I could choose all of them, Chen Zong said to himself. However, unless one had made a great contribution, one would only be qualified to choose the 2nd supreme secret technique after passing through the 5th level of the 3 great trial grounds. As for the 3rd supreme secret technique, one would have to pass through the 7th level of the 3 great trial grounds. It was impossible to pass through so many levels and challenge the 7th floor. So far, no one in the 9 Heavens Imperial Court had been able to do so, not even the monstrous Origin clan members. As for passing through the 5th floor, there were some, but very few. After obtaining the supreme secret technique, the 9-fold melee, Chen Zong left the secret pavilion. However, he did not immediately return to the Heart Sword Peak. Instead, he went to the Tao Alliance to look for Senior Lin Ming. He wanted to return the previous sword techniques and borrow the other sword techniques to study. About the divine decree? Lin Ming immediately pondered. After about 10 breaths, he said, I remember that there should be techniques related to the divine decree in the Sutra Depository. You can go look for them. Thank you, Senior. Chen Zong immediately took his leave and went to the Sutra Depository. After returning the sword techniques, he chose the other sword techniques and began to look for them. He searched through the 2nd and 3rd floors, but unfortunately, he did not find them. What a pity, Chen Zong muttered to himself. He left the Tao Alliance with the sword techniques and returned to the Heart Sword Peak. Cultivate. Continue to cultivate. The feeling of being able to cultivate continuously and improve oneself continuously was too wonderful. Chen Zong was addicted to it. It was really a supreme pleasure. Chen Zong cultivated the annihilation force of the 9 Heavens Breath Gale while comprehending the sword techniques and the supreme secret technique, the 9-fold melee, which he had just obtained. He progressed side by side without wasting any time. Suddenly, Jiao Yi sent a message saying that Lin Ming from the Tao Alliance had come. Although Chen Zong was surprised, he immediately went to welcome him. Chen Zong, the divine guidance technique is on the 4th floor. I have applied to the Palace Lord, and he has made an exception for you. Lin Ming took out a jade book of inheritance and handed it to Chen Zong. It recorded a technique called the divine guidance technique. Chapter 2456. There was no sense of time in cultivation. Year after year, Chen Zong didn't challenge anyone, nor was he challenged by anyone. This was because every new pupil was working hard in cultivation, using all the resources available in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court to improve themselves as much as possible. Before one's potential reached its limit, one should not be distracted by other things. Protector Tai Zhongling had returned. He was an expert at the 4th level of body refinement. His physique was extremely powerful, and as he stood there, he was like an unshakable mountain. The aura he exuded pressured the surroundings, as if it wanted to repel everything. With Lin Ming's recommendation and Chen Zong's status, Tai Zhongling did not refuse. Instead, he talked to Chen Zong about the universe's body refinement path, which was quite different from the void. However, this difference would only become apparent at the 3rd level. At the 2nd level, the difference was not particularly big. This was similar to the Qi refinement path. It could be said that the difference between the void and the universe's cultivation path was the same at the Dao control realm and the Dao power realm. At the Yuanming realm and the spirit condensation realm, there would be subtle differences, but the real difference would only appear at the divine power realm and the divine aspect realm. Since this was the case, Chen Zong chose a body refinement technique from the Dao Alliance's Hidden Scriptures Pavilion to cultivate. Although this body refinement technique was not as good as the annihilation force of the Nine Heavens breath, it was better than nothing. Chen Zong could feel his body gradually strengthening as he cultivated it. The more Chen Zong cultivated, the more he realized how amazing the spirit condensation realm was. It was as if there was endless potential to be unearthed. Even if he felt like he was about to reach a bottleneck, he could still improve as long as he worked hard. Strong. Even stronger. Gradually stronger. 10 years. Another 10 years passed. Chen Zong had just come out of seclusion when Lin Ming came looking for him. The disciple meet is about to begin. The palace lord hopes that you can stay alive and participate. Lin Ming went straight to the point. Disciple meet? Chen Zong was surprised. The Nine Heavens Imperial Court has 2 levels of disciple meet. The first is Earth level, corresponding to the spirit condensation realm, and the second is Heaven level, corresponding to the divine aspect realm. Lin Ming quickly explained, the Earth level disciple meeting is held once every 100 years, while the Sky level disciple meeting is held once every 1,000 years. Chen Zong listened quietly. Disciples can choose to participate in the disciple meet or not. However, participation is generally encouraged because you can fight with other disciples to your heart's content. It's a good training for yourself. In addition, if you can get a good ranking, you will be rewarded handsomely. Lin Kuei smiled. For example, the rewards of pills, cosmos god crystals, cultivation time in the 9 great sacred halls, and even the 3 holy grounds for cultivation. There's also the promotion of disciples. Lin Kuang laughed, causing Chen Zong's eyes to brighten. 10 years ago, you were able to fight with Shifu and pass through the first 3 levels of the 3 great trial grounds, which means that you are not weak. 10 years have passed, and I believe that you have become even stronger, Lin Kuang said with a smile. His tone was full of encouragement. Who knows, you might be able to fight for the top 10. If you can get into the top 100, the rewards will be quite generous. For you, the benefits will be great. Senior, when will the Earth grade disciple meet begin? Chen Zong asked immediately. After 10 years of cultivation, there was obvious improvement every year. After 10 years, his strength had become much stronger. However, Chen Zong was not very clear about how strong he had become. This was because in 10 years, no one had challenged Chen Zong. Chen Zong did not challenge anyone, nor did he challenge the 3 great trial grounds. This was because he could feel that he was improving every moment. It was either in one aspect or another. It was so shocking that Chen Zong did not want to leave the Heart Sword Palace. Until now, when he came out of seclusion, Chen Zong could feel that his cultivation was reaching the limit of the spirit concentration realm. Therefore, he came out of seclusion. He did not expect to encounter the disciple meet. 1 month. You have 1 month to prepare. Lin Kuei smiled. Prepare well for the disciple meet in your best state. I hope you can get into the top 100. Top 100. When Chen Zong heard this again, he was a little surprised. This did not sound like a good ranking. Don't underestimate the top 100. Lin Kuei seemed to see Chen Zong's confusion. With a serious expression, he said in a serious tone, "This time, the disciples who will participate in the Earth Grade Disciple Meet will not only be from your batch. There will also be some from the previous batch. As long as they have not broken through to the third realm, they are qualified to participate. Think about it. The previous batch of disciples who had not broken through to the third realm have been in the second realm for a longer time than you. They are all very talented. In addition, the Origin tribesmen have a great innate advantage. Their strength is also very shocking. From what I know, there will be at least 10,000 disciples participating this time. In the past, at least half of the top 100 were obtained by the Origin tribesmen. The remaining half was obtained by the Origin tribesmen. If an outer disciple can get into the top 100, he can directly become a true disciple." Lin Kuei's words surprised Chen Zong. Once one became a true disciple, it meant a change in the cultivation environment and an increase in opportunities. In addition, those who perform well enough, even if they do not get into the top 100, have a chance of gaining the favor of the upper echelons of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. They will make an exception and promote them to true disciples. According to Lin Kuei's words, this disciples' meet was like the carp leaping through the Dragon Gate convention. As long as you performed well enough, you had a chance of receiving generous reward. Because of this, almost all disciples would sign up to participate. Even if they could not get into the top 100, as long as they performed well enough, there was still hope. "Senior, what's the highest ranking our human race can achieve?" Chen Zong couldn't help but ask. In the past 300 years, the highest ranking that the human race has gotten in the 3 Earth-level disciples meets is the 200th, Lin Kuei said with a bitter smile. Chen Zong was stunned. The human race came from the 3rd-tier and 2nd-tier voids, and there was no lack of prodigies among them. However, for the 3 Earth-level disciples meets in the past 300 years, the highest ranking was only the 200th. They did not even get into the top 100. It was really hard to imagine. 300 years ago, someone from the human race managed to get into the top 100, but the highest ranking was only the 30th. As far as I know, the highest ranking that the human race has gotten was the 13th. Senior Lin Kuei sighed. That was 10,000 years ago. Now, that lord is one of the upper echelons of the Tao Alliance, and has a prominent reputation in the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. Hearing Lin Kuei's words, Chen Zong also understood how difficult it was to get into the top 100. He did not expect that there would be a human who could get the 13th place. This meant that he would have to defeat many members of the Origin race. Cultivate well and welcome the disciples meet in your best state. It would be best if you could get into the top 100 and bring glory to the Tao Alliance again, Lin Kuei said with a smile. Of course, although he had confidence in Chen Zong, it was still unknown whether Chen Zong would be able to get into the top 100. After all, the innate differences between races were very obvious. The longer one cultivated, the greater the difference. Remember, even if you are unable to obtain a ranking in the top 100, you cannot perform too badly. Otherwise, it is very likely that you will be demoted. In serious cases, you may even be stripped of your status as a true disciple and be directly demoted to an outer disciple. Lin Ming said this in an incomparably solemn manner. In history, there had been cases of true disciples being demoted. The competition in the 9 Heavens Imperial Court was this direct. The capable would rise to the top. Chen Zong nodded. After sending Lin Kuei out of the Heart Sword Palace, he returned. The disciples meet, huh? Chen Zong could not help but clench his fists. He took a deep breath and a smile appeared on his lips. I will definitely get into the top 100. This was a form of confidence that originated from the continuous improvement of one's strength. It was also a form of conviction. After 10 years of closed-door training, coupled with the Heart Sutra, Chen Zong knew very well that he had improved in all aspects. Cultivation, swordsmanship, secret techniques, great Tao comprehension, all of these directly formed one's strength. Any one-sided improvement would eventually lead to a deformed strength. It might be good in the short term, but it was not conducive to long-term development. If one encountered a true expert, one's weakness would be grasped and eventually defeated. Although a true expert had his strengths and weaknesses, at least he would be able to bring out the best in what he was good at to cover up the shortcomings in what he was not good at. Of course, the best way was to improve the aspects that he was not good at as much as possible and reach a certain level. I will cultivate well in this 1 month. Perhaps there will not be much improvement, but at least I can sort out the results of my 10 years of cultivation, Chen Zong said to himself. In addition, I will also adjust my essence, spirit to the best state. Prepare for battle. Chen Zong was preparing for battle. Many of the spirit condensation realm disciples were also preparing for the disciples' meet in a month's time. The disciples' meet was an excellent opportunity for them to change their own destinies, especially for external disciples. Whether or not they could become a true disciple depended on this event. Otherwise, they could only suppress their own cultivation level and try their best to improve other aspects while waiting for the next Earth-level disciples' meet. Or they could break through to the third realm and work hard to improve themselves so that they could participate in the sky-level disciples' meet that was held once every 1,000 years. To be fair, the latter was more difficult than the former. After all, they had just broken through to the third realm. Compared to a peak third realm expert, the difference was very obvious. Even if they participated in the sky-level disciples' meet, they would not be a match for them. Instead, it was more likely to suppress their cultivation level and improve other aspects to improve their strength. Time flew. 1 month was actually very short. Day after day passed quickly. Finally, it was the last day. In Heart Sword Palace, Chen Zong also received Lin Ming's message. He opened his eyes and a cold glint shot out. It tore through the sky and pierced through everything. Then it disappeared. Is it finally starting? Chen Zong's lips curled into a smile. With a move, he walked out of the secret cultivation room and out of the main door of Heart Sword Palace. After notifying Jiao Yi, Chen Zong quickly walked down Heart Sword Peak and toward the Realm Gate Mountain. The disciples' meet was not held in the 9 heavens of the 9 heavens imperial court. Chapter 2457. The 9 heavens imperial court was a great force with great strength and deep heritage. For example, the 3 great cultivation sanctuaries, the 3 great training grounds, the 5 great mystery realms, and the 9 great temples were all located outside the 9 heavens imperial court. In addition, the death battle ring was also established and was not located in any of the 9 heavens. And now, the place where Chen Zong appeared after passing through the Realm Gate Mountains, Realm Gate Mountain, was one of them. This was a squarish piece of land. This squarish piece of land was built from pieces of dark green stone slabs that were 10 meters long and 10 meters wide. Figures kept appearing on it. There were humans, the Origin clan, and other races. There were more than 10 of them in total. By the time all the members had arrived, there were already more than 10,000 of them. Every one of them had the cultivation of the spirit condensation realm, and they were all at the peak of the spirit condensation realm. They had reached the point where their cultivation could no longer be improved. Of course, just because the cultivation realm could no longer be improved did not mean that other aspects could not be improved. For example, there was still room for improvement in the cultivation of martial arts techniques, the cultivation of secret techniques, and even the comprehension of the great Tao. The improvement in every aspect would promote the enhancement of one's strength. More than 10,000 people at the peak of the spirit condensation realm. Every one of them would be a top prodigy in the void. Their foundations were much more solid than the average cultivators. With the cultivation environment and resources of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, they had become more powerful than before. Their auras were condensed and very shocking. 13,000 disciples, the Earth-level disciple meet, which is held once every 100 years, will now officially begin. A majestic voice that seemed to come from above the nine heavens with an indescribable power directly impacted the hearts of the crowd and caused them to tremble. As the majestic voice fell, a violent and mighty roar sounded and reverberated in all directions. At the same time, the crowd only felt that the land under their feet seemed to be shaking violently. Immediately, pieces of dark green stone slabs that were 10 meters long and wide appeared from nothingness and flew in from all directions. Sounds of metal clashing could be heard. Pieces of stone slabs immediately formed a path that was nearly 1,000 meters wide. To be precise, it was 999 meters wide. It continued to extend forward, and no one knew how far it went. At the end, a huge gate appeared. The gate was 1,000 meters tall, and on the two pillars there were countless runes. Each rune seemed to have a trace of indescribable mystery. The countless runes gathered together, and the mysteries converged as if there was no end to them. A buzzing sound rang out, and within the 1,000-meter-wide gate, there seemed to be a stream of light rippling out like water. Disciples, the path before you is called 1 in 10 miles. As the name implies, it is 1 in 10. That vigorous voice sounded again. This stage is an elimination round. Those who are not qualified will be eliminated. Only those who are qualified will be able to participate in the disciples' meeting. The total number of participants for the disciple meet is 1,000. As the voice sounded, everyone was secretly surprised. There were 13,000 outer disciples and true disciples, but only a total of 1,000 people could participate in the disciples' meeting. The ratio was very low, less than 1/10. It was somewhat appropriate to say that it was 1 in 10. Attention, disciples. When I give the order, you must start moving. The earliest 1 in 10 miles will pass the 1 in 10 miles gate. The 1,000 people who pass through the 1 in 10 miles gate will enter the real disciples' meeting. The rest will be eliminated. But there is one thing that you must remember. You are not allowed to deliberately attack others in any way. Once you violate this rule, you will be eliminated. So simple. Doesn't that mean that those who are faster will have an advantage? While the group of disciples were secretly preparing, they were also very surprised. This path seemed to be very long, but to them it was actually nothing. Moreover, it was a smooth path. There was no doubt that such a path would be unimpeded. In this way, those who were fast would be able to get a spot, and those who were slow would lose the opportunity. However, being fast did not mean that one was strong, and being slow did not mean that one was weak. Begin. After a few breaths of silence, the vast and powerful voice immediately sounded. It did not give the crowd much time to think. Like a sudden clap of thunder, it resounded through the void and directly entered everyone's ears. Although a few breaths of time was short, it was enough for everyone to adjust themselves. Moreover, everyone was already prepared. Charge! In an instant, everyone exploded with their fastest speed and immediately rushed forward. After all, the 1 in 10 miles gate seemed very long, but in fact, it was only 999,000 meters long. With everyone's speed, this distance could be crossed very quickly. However, it was not that simple. When Chernzong's body moved, he activated his movement skill and flew forward. He felt an invisible pressure forming in front of him and pressing on his body. Invisibly, it began to affect his speed and slowed down a little. Chernzong also noticed that the others were also affected. However, some of them were more strongly affected, while others were less affected. Everyone understood what was going on. As they continued to move forward, the pressure was still there. It did not increase or decrease. Those who were fast were still fast, and those who were slow were still slow. In just a few short breaths of time, someone had already crossed the distance of 11,111 meters and continued to move forward. However, his speed had once again decreased by a bit. Among everyone, Chernzong's speed was not the fastest, nor was it the slowest. He should belong to the upper middle level. Most of the people who were faster than him were from the Origin clan, while the rest were from the 4 first sequence void life forms. Chernzong was not in a hurry. The 1 in 10 miles gate was not that simple. If one could take the lead and get a spot by relying on speed, it would be too shallow. When Chernzong crossed the distance of 11,111 meters, he immediately felt the omnipresent pressure become stronger. It was at least twice as strong. Under this pressure, his speed was affected again and decreased a little. Soon, Chernzong discovered that the 99,999 meters should be divided into 9 sections. Every time he crossed 11,111 meters, the invisible pressure would double. Now, Chernzong had crossed the 2nd section and entered the 3rd section. The pressure was even stronger, and his speed decreased again. When Chernzong crossed the 3rd section and entered the 4th section, he discovered that there was a change. It was no longer the invisible pressure. Instead, with a series of buzzing sounds, layers of invisible waves came directly from the front. The power of the waves was very shocking, and the coverage was very wide. It completely covered the entire 10 miles gate. There was no way to dodge, and one could only face it head-on. Under the impact of the tyrannical invisible waves, the faces of the disciples who were rushing at the front changed, and their speed decreased again. This kind of powerful impact could not be resisted by relying on speed. One must have enough strength to withstand it. If one only relied on speed, they would be at a disadvantage here. Indeed, the people who were rushing at the front began to show a gap under the powerful impact. Some were still very fast and continued to move forward, while others slowed down greatly. Some even stopped directly. When Chernzong sensed the powerful impact, he immediately unleashed a wave of energy. Using his fingers like a sword, he slashed through the air, using his sharpness to cut through the pressure. He continued to advance as if he was riding the wind and breaking the waves, but his speed had indeed decreased. Could it be that the 1 in 10 miles gate is divided into 3 sections and 9 sections? Chernzong thought to himself. According to the current situation, it was possible. Now that he was at the 4th section, the impact of the 5th section should be even stronger, and the 6th section should be even stronger. At this point, the gap that appeared at the beginning changed again. Some people were not good at speed, but they had an advantage in other aspects, such as resisting the impact. Therefore, they gradually caught up. At the 5th stage, just as Chernzong had expected, the invisible force of the impact increased once again. At the 6th section, the impact power increased again. 13,000 people were all in the middle 3 sections. The fastest was at the 6th section, and the slowest was at the 4th section. The gap was very obvious. Someone took the lead to pass the 6th section and rushed into the 7th section. On the 7th section of the road, beams of light appeared out of thin air. Each beam of light was 1 meter long and as thick as an arm. They were circular in shape like glowing round rods. Each round rod was filled with a shocking power. In the void around the path there were thousands of round sticks, and they were still increasing. Boom! As soon as the round sticks moved, they immediately bombarded from all directions. It was extremely shocking, and it was chaotic and without any pattern. Dodge! 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 The first person to reach the 7th section immediately dodged, using his agility to the extreme. As he dodged, he gradually moved forward, but his speed was also greatly affected. The round sticks seemed to be endless, constantly bombarding. Moreover, some of the round sticks would circle and attack from the side or the back, making it even harder to defend. One of the original people was careless and was hit by a round stick. In an instant, the round stick exploded with a terrifying power, causing the original person's body to be sent flying. While his body was still in midair, and he was quickly adjusting, more round sticks bombarded him. Once, twice, thrice. The original person was sent flying for 10 miles, and he fell directly into the darkness, as if he was swallowed up and disappeared. This scene made everyone's expression change. What would happen if he fell? Would he die? No one knew, and they did not have time to think about it. When one reached the 7th section, they had to face the impact of the round sticks, and they had to focus on dodging. At this time, speed was not much of an advantage, because it was a test of one's ability to adapt. Speed, power, and adaptability. These were the 3 aspects that were being tested in the path of Tenli. Only by excelling in these 3 aspects could one be the first to pass the 10-mile path, pass through the 10-mile path, and obtain the qualification to participate in the disciple meet and compete for the top 100. This was because only the top 100 could receive the reward from the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. The chances of receiving the reward outside the top 100 were too low. Baidu search Xing 81 Chinese Networko. No advertising message. Chapter 2458. From time to time, people would be hit by the round rods and fall off the path, disappearing into the darkness below. But thinking about it, those people probably wouldn't die. Otherwise, it would be a loss to the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. Chernzong had already passed the 7th and 8th sections and was now on the 9th section. In the 9th section, the round rods attacked more frequently. They were so densely packed that it was almost impenetrable. It was extremely terrifying. These round rods could be dodged or blocked, but the power of the round rods was too strong. Once blocked, it was very likely that one would be momentarily paralyzed, which was very disadvantageous. The best way was to dodge. Under the 1 mind and 5 realms, Chernzong grasped all the movements around him. His reaction was also raised to the extreme, and he kept dodging. Even so, he was still hit a few times. Fortunately, Chernzong's reaction was extremely fast, and he avoided the danger of being hit continuously and flying off the path. His figure flashed past the last round stick, and directly rushed into the door that was overflowing with flowing lights and colors, and disappeared. One by one, they rushed into the door and disappeared. Almost there, only 3 meters left. A heavenly legend's eyes shone brightly, and he was slightly excited. 3 meters was extremely short. Dodging and stepping out, he reached the door in an instant. His body also came into contact with the colorful door, but he didn't rush in. Instead, he was blocked, as if he collided with a layer of toughness, and was directly rebounded. How can this be? This person's face was full of surprise. He had already reached the 1 section, so why couldn't he enter? In the next breath, he was directly hit by the round rods, flying off the path and falling down. The quota was full. In the next breath, all the round rods disappeared. Unfortunately, you didn't get a quota. The vast voice sounded again, and instantly, the expressions of the people who were still on the 1 section changed. They were very unwilling, but there was nothing they could do. Rules were rules, and they couldn't be violated. Where is this? Chernzong raised his head and looked at the sky. The sky was gray and covered with wisps of dark clouds. They gathered into a large, dark mass, as if they would collapse at any time, bringing a very oppressive atmosphere to this side of the world. The ground was covered with craters and fissures, and rubble could be seen everywhere. Chernzong got the feeling that this place was a wasteland that had been left behind after a great battle. In addition to himself, Chen Zong also saw a figure thousands of meters away. It was a member of the Vajra clan. Everyone, congratulations on obtaining the qualification to enter the disciple meet. The vast voice sounded in everyone's ears. This is the ruins of the death battle. Your disciple meet will be held here. What I'm going to say next is very important. Everyone's listening to me. If you find other disciples and kill them, you'll get 1 point. First, you won't get repeated points for killing the same person. Second, there's no time limit for this meet. It will end when everyone dies once, and the final ranking will be determined by the final point. Now, begin your battle, disciples. As the voice fell, Chen Zong's eyes turned and immediately stared at the member of the Vajra clan who was thousands of meters away. The member of the Vajra clan also looked at Chen Zong immediately, and his eyes flickered. Boom! The strong legs of the member of the Vajra clan suddenly bent and erupted with a tyrannical force. He directly hit the ground and pushed his body forward, rushing out like a war chariot rampaging. The Vajra clan's talent was physique, and they were good at it. Their strength was amazing, and every member of the Vajra clan could be more than 3 meters tall. The bigger the body, the higher the talent of the Vajra clan. It could be said that the Vajra clan and the Giant clan were similar. It was said that the bloodline of the two clans had something in common. Of course, the Vajra clan's bloodline was not as good as the Giant clan's. Therefore, the Vajra clan was born in the Second Order Void, while the Giant clan was born in the First Order Void. In addition, while the Vajra clan and the Giant clan were similar, there were also differences. However, even among the Second Order Void clans, the Vajra clan belonged to the top, and their individual strength was very strong. His tyrannical body rushed forward, his feet repeatedly stomping on the ground. Every step he took would shatter a piece of the ground. Regardless of whether it was mud or stone, they would be crushed in an instant, leaving behind footprints. The ground shook and rumbled. Dust and smoke billowed like a giant python swaying in the wind. The astonishing aura was madly oppressive, and Chen Zong felt suffocated. Strong. Very strong. The distance of thousands of meters was crossed in just a few breaths. The Vajra clan member raised his arm with a ferocious smile and suddenly blasted out a punch. The weapon of the Vajra clan was their body. As the punch blasted out, in an instant, a bronze luster flickered on the skin of the Vajra clan member and flowed like a turbulent tide. It rushed into the right fist and directly covered it. It was as if he was wearing a pair of bronze gloves, and it was incomparably solid. The similarity between the Vajra clan and the Giant clan was their strong physique. However, the difference was that the Giant clan was better at strength, unparalleled strength. Although the Vajra clan was also good at strength, they were better at defense. Their body was like a Vajra, and its defensive power was amazing. Therefore, it became a kind of weapon, and when combined with the Vajra strength that they cultivated, it was extremely terrifying. For example, when the Vajra clan members cultivated the martial arts, it would be transformed into the Vajra strength. Of course, there were some differences in the Vajra strength transformed from different martial arts. For example, when the Vajra clan members cultivated the annihilation force of the 9 heavens breath, their Vajra strength would be faster and sharper. However, if it was the art of domination of the 9 heavens strength, it would focus on strength and dominance. This punch seemed to be unreserved. It was like a bronze meteorite blasted out. The aura shook and the air was repelled. Layers of ripples rushed out and swept in all directions. It turned into a raging wave, and a gust of wind whistled endlessly. The pressure of the punch was so amazing that Chen Zong could hardly open his eyes. In the face of this terrible punch, Chen Zong's body swayed, and immediately it was shattered. However, what was shattered was only an afterimage. After the afterimage was shattered, the power of the punch blasted the ground. As the dust flew, Chen Zong had already bypassed it. He unsheathed his sword and slashed across the sky. This sword was so fast that it hit the body of the Vajra clan member in an instant. The Vajra clan member only reacted then. It was a pity that this sword did not break the defense of the Vajra clan member. With the 9th heaven armor weakening 10%, the remaining 90% of the power was not enough to break the defense of the Vajra clan member. So strong. Chen Zong was secretly shocked. Die! The Vajra clan member suddenly sneered and blasted out another punch with terrifying power. However, no matter how strong the power and the pressure was, it could not really affect Chen Zong. It was just an afterimage that was hit. You can't break my defense. The Vajra clan member roared. Is that so? Chen Zong's lips curled into a smile, and his eyes were as sharp as ice. He drew his sword. The sword light carried a touch of light green. The light green was like a wisp of wind. It was very thin, extremely light, and extremely fast. It was also filled with a sense of sharpness. The sword was infused with 3 kinds of mysteries, namely the mystery of lightness, the mystery of speed, and the mystery of sharpness. Moreover, the power of the cool wind force was activated to the extreme, and the power of the sword principle was also activated. Kill. This sword was unavoidable and once again hit the Vajra clan member's body. The Vajra clan member's face was filled with a cold sneer. Just as he was about to speak, as if to mock Chen Zong for not being able to break his defense, his expression changed drastically, and there was a touch of fear. This was because his body's defense was broken. That sword was extremely sharp. Kill. This sword directly tore through his defense, leaving a sword wound on his waist that was so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood flowed out. Before the Vajra clan member could fight back, the second sword light went straight for his neck. Kill. One sword cut off his head. The Vajra clan member's tall body fell to the ground, and immediately, it quickly faded and disappeared. Those who were killed in the death battle ruins would not really die. Instead, they would be randomly resurrected in the ruins and continue to fight. Chen Zong received 1 point for killing the Vajra clan member. He's really strong. Unfortunately, he can't make me use all my strength, Chen Zong said to himself. He glanced around, and then his body swayed, turning into a gust of wind and swept out to look for the other disciples. This was hunting. It was also being hunted. The time limit was 1 year, and there were 1,000 people. 1 point would be awarded for killing 1 person. If one killed 999 people, one would be awarded 999 points. This was because no matter how many times one killed the same person twice, 3, or even 4 times, one would only be awarded 1 point from the first kill. This also eliminated the possibility of deliberately gaining points. It had to be said that the rules were very clear. All kinds of tricks were prohibited. In the end, all that was left was a real contest of strength. It was clear at a glance who was stronger and who was weaker. With my strength, I should be able to get into the top 100. Chen Zong thought to himself as he swept out to look for prey. Of course, this was not absolute. After all, each of the 1,000 people had extraordinary strength. They had been tested and were the best of the best. Those who had been eliminated could not be compared to them. Perhaps there might be a few stronger people among those who had been eliminated, but that was it. It would be difficult for them to get into the top 100. If they did not get into the top 100, it would be difficult for them to get the generous rewards. Top 100. At first glance, it sounded sloppy and ordinary, but it was very difficult and contained a lot of gold. The reason why Chen Zong was not absolutely sure that he could get into the top 100 was that in addition to this year's disciples, there were also disciples from the previous year who had participated. It was said that some of the disciples who had gotten into the top 100 in the previous year deliberately suppressed their realms and did not break through. Their purpose was to get a higher ranking in this year's competition and make it into the top 10. This was because the rewards for the top 10 were far better than the rewards for the top 100. It was worth it to exchange 100 years for a place in the top 10. Of course, everything was not absolutely perfect. Chapter 2459. The ruins of the Battle of Death, as far as the eye could see, were ruins. Broken walls, pits, and cracks crisscrossed everywhere. It was a remnant scene after a great battle. Chunzong also knew how this was left behind. For example, in the battle between him and the Vajra clan member, the Vajra clan member's fists were fierce and incomparably violent, directly smashing the ground into a pit. The pit would remain, and if there were no accidents, it would continue to exist. It has been 30 years since I entered the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. I have been cultivating, and finally, it is time for me to make a name for myself. A demon dweller flew rapidly above the ruins at an astonishing speed, like a black light flashing past. There was a sinister smile on his face, and his eyes were cold. 30 years. It had been 30 years since he entered the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. In these 30 years, he had never fought or battled with others. He had only focused on cultivating and improving himself. Compared to 30 years ago, his current abilities were much stronger. Finally, it was time to test the results of these 30 years of hard work. This demon dweller had his eyes on a prey. In a flash, he approached silently from behind. Immediately, his speed soared to the extreme, and a sharp whistle sounded in the void. When that person sensed something, he was already a step too late. A black light broke through the air, like an arrow leaving the bow, carrying an extremely sharp aura, and instantly arrived. Too fast. And the angle was tricky, and it was a very strange attack that was difficult to guard against and dodge. This attack directly penetrated from the back, broke the heart, and killed him. Until death, this person did not have much reaction, because the demon dweller was like an assassin. First, he approached stealthily, and then he struck a fatal blow. It was impossible to guard against. 3 points. The demon dweller stared coldly at the corpse on the ground, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Immediately, his figure flashed, and he left again. Such an assassination did not consume much of his strength at all, and he did not need to rest to recover. Not long after, the demon dweller found another prey and fixed his eyes on it. A human. Let me think, it turns out to be the third-order void human Chunzong, a true disciple of the 5th layer of heaven. This demon dweller was not a true disciple, but an outer disciple of the 3rd layer of heaven. Then, you will be the first 5th heaven disciple to die under my blade. Xiao Chen's figure flashed, and he silently approached Chunzong. As for Chunzong, he was unhurriedly moving through the rubble, searching for the other disciples. The Vajra clan member was the first one, and he had also killed one just now, so he had a total of 2 points. Immediately, Chunzong's eyes flickered imperceptibly, and he regained his composure in an instant. His expression did not change at all, and his movements did not change at all. He continued to walk forward step by step. A black shadow swept over and approached Chunzong silently. When it was 10 meters away, it suddenly exploded. That was a kind of extreme power, the eruption of extreme power. In just an instant, it turned into a beam of black light, a sharp beam of black light that seemed to be able to pierce and tear everything apart. It carried an incomparable murderous intent as it broke through the air in an instant. There was no obstruction at all. The distance of 10 meters was very short, not even 1/10 of a breath's time. The black light directly arrived and penetrated Chunzong's body. However, at the moment of penetration, there was no obstruction at all. It directly penetrated through. This kind of relaxed and carefree feeling was too empty. The demon dweller's expression suddenly changed, and without hesitation, he immediately turned into a black shadow and rushed forward at the fastest speed. Because in an instant, what he penetrated was not Chunzong, but an afterimage. The other party actually dodged the assassination at the moment. His reaction speed and movement speed were really amazing. Since you are here, then leave your life. A cold voice that carried a hint of sharpness blew over like a gust of wind and entered his ears. At the same time, a pale green sword light tore through the air and arrived with an attack. Fast. The extremely fast sword was integrated with the mystery of 3 kinds of swordsmanship. In addition to the power of the great success clear wind force, its speed reached the extreme. However, the demon dweller was indeed extraordinary. His speed was extremely fast, and it was very shocking. Moreover, at the critical moment, he burst out with a secret technique, and his speed increased again. He actually narrowly avoided Chen Zong's sword. However, Chen Zong's speed also burst out in an instant, and the sword attacked again. This time, he could not dodge. He could only quickly turn around and wave the black sharp blade in his hand to block Chen Zong's sword. The black sharp blade was extremely fast. When it was waved, it brought about a series of afterimages across the air. It was like a folding fan that opened in an instant, to block Chen Zong's sword. However, Chen Zong's wrist turned slightly. His swordsmanship was superb. In an instant, it changed several times, as if it had turned into a shadow, directly passing through the opponent's black sharp blade. It seemed to penetrate everything and kill the demon dweller. Pierce through. This sword, like a gust of wind, was all-pervasive, and directly pierced through the opponent's forehead. You! The demon dweller stared at Chen Zong. His eyes were filled with shock and unwillingness. Then, they turned gray and lost their vitality. Chen Zong looked at the opponent, and a light smile appeared on his face. One must know that his divine will had been tempered and became more powerful. What followed was the improvement of his perception. When the demon dweller targeted and approached him, Chen Zong felt it. Naturally, he would not be unprepared. He dodged the opponent's attack with an extremely fast speed, and then counterattacked in an instant. With his extremely fast speed and superb swordsmanship, he killed the opponent. In those 10 years of seclusion, Chen Zong's swordsmanship had obviously improved. It could be said that this was the biggest improvement. Chen Zong had already comprehended and mastered the mysteries of the more than 30 swordsmanship in the Tao Alliance's scripture depository. In this way, Chen Zong also combined some mysteries with each other to increase the power of his swordsmanship. For example, the previous sword was not simply fast. In addition to speed, there was a kind of sharpness that could pierce through everything. These 3 are not qualified to make me use my full strength. Chen Zong thought to himself and continued to move forward. In addition to looking for disciples to kill and gain points, Chen Zong also wanted to fight with a strong opponent. 10 years of seclusion, 10 years of polishing a sword. Then, if his swordsmanship was to be used to the extreme, how strong would it be? He did not know. At least, he lacked a suitable opponent to test it out. But it doesn't matter. Among the 1,000 people who entered this time, there is no lack of people who are extremely powerful. I will fight with them. Chen Zong thought to himself. This battle was inevitable. It was only a matter of time. The 4th opponent was a heavenly human. However, he was also from the 3rd heaven. Although he was talented and powerful, he was still unable to make Chen Zong use his full strength. He was still easily killed. However, the 5th opponent was not ordinary. This was because this opponent was from the ancient beast clan. Not only was he talented, but he was also a true disciple of the 4th heaven. In addition, he was also a disciple of the previous batch. In the previous batch, he was an outer disciple. However, because of his outstanding performance in the disciples' meet, he made it into the top 100 and was promoted to a true disciple of the 4th heaven. However, his ranking was not high enough and he did not receive as many rewards as he expected. Therefore, he suppressed his cultivation level and did not make a breakthrough. This was all for the sake of making a name for himself this time and achieving a higher ranking. Do you understand the feeling of suppressing your cultivation level and not making a breakthrough? This ancient beast clan member did not attack directly. Instead, he smiled crazily and said, "That feeling is not good. It is really not good. You can make a breakthrough and master more power, but you have to painstakingly suppress it. What am I doing this for? Isn't it for this year's disciples' meet?" This ancient beast clan member roared at Chernzong as if he was crazy. However, Chernzong did not dare to underestimate this ancient beast clan member. This was because the aura that this ancient beast clan member exuded was very powerful. It was far more powerful than the 4 opponents that he had killed before. The difference was huge. Thinking about it, this ancient beast clan member was not bad to begin with. Moreover, he had cultivated for at least 100 years in the 4th heaven. This was only the most basic estimate. After 100 years, his improvement would be shocking. As soon as he finished speaking, the ancient beast moved at an astonishing speed. He closed in on Chernzong like a streak of light. He clenched his fist, and his joints seemed to bulge. Suddenly, he threw a punch at Chernzong with terrifying power, as if he was about to shatter the sky. From the aura, Chernzong knew that this ancient beast clan member cultivated the 9 heavens 1000 condensation technique of the 3 great ultimate technique. It seemed that he had cultivated the first level to an extremely high level. Each of the 3 great ultimate techniques had 5 levels. The first level corresponded to the divine condensation realm. If one wanted to cultivate the second level, they would have to break through to the 3rd level, the divine condensation realm. However, there were differences even in the first level. There were 4 small levels: entry, small success, large success, and complete. The difference between each small level was very obvious. This ancient beast clan member should have cultivated the first level of the 9 heavens 1000 condensation technique to the complete realm. However, Chernzong had only cultivated the first level of the annihilation technique of the 9 heavens 1000 condensation technique to the complete realm. He was close to the complete realm, but he had not yet reached the complete realm. There was a huge difference between being close to the complete realm and having reached the complete realm. In addition, with the extra 100 years, this ancient beast clan member's talent was not bad. He could have improved in all other aspects to a shocking level. In fact, this ancient beast clan member had already improved everything that he could improve to the extreme. He had reached a point where he could not improve anymore. If it was not for the disciples' competition, he would have broken through to the divine condensation realm decades ago. The feeling of not improving for decades was very frustrating. It was not that he could not see the hope of breaking through. It was that he could break through at any time, but he had to suppress it. That punch seemed simple, but it wasn't. It directly blended the profoundness of a few fist art. Its power was extremely tyrannical and terrifying. As the fist pressure pressed down, it directly brought about a great threat to Chernzong. However, Chernzong did not feel the slightest bit of fear. Instead, his eyes lit up in an instant. An indescribable power filled the air, and a touch of sharpness exploded. He drew his sword. The sword light turned into a light green color. It blew out like a gust of wind, carrying with it a strong power. It directly slashed at the ancient beast clan member's powerful punch. Chernzong wanted to test the ancient beast clan member's direct attack power. Chapter 2460. One punch, one sword. It was a head-on attack. In an instant, the sword light was shattered and the sword force was dispersed. An extremely powerful force blasted towards Chernzong as if it was going to smash him into pieces. Retreat. Chernzong had to retreat to avoid the powerful impact of the punch. You are indeed powerful. Chernzong was secretly shocked. He did not use any secret techniques in that attack, but he had unleashed the full power of the clear wind force. That attack had also integrated the mystery of hardness and other powerful mysteries that were suitable for head-on attack. However, it was still defeated and pushed back. Since that was the case, he had to show his true strength. In a flash, Chen Zong immediately disappeared like a gust of wind. He circled around at an astonishing speed and attacked the Palea beast from the side. Here! A glint flashed across the ancient beast's eyes. Immediately, he threw out a ferocious punch. It was powerful and the fist force was majestic. It seemed to be even more powerful than the previous punch. It was as if it was going to shatter the space. Pressure. The shocking pressure of the punch directly smashed Chen Zong's body into pieces. However, what was smashed was only an afterimage. At the critical moment, Chen Zong dodged at an astonishing speed. Boom! Boom! You are really powerful. Chen Zong was even more shocked, but he was also more excited. His fighting spirit was bursting, and his sword will was surging. The way of the heart, the way of the sword. The power of the two great paths overlapped, and the power of the sword increased again. Immediately it merged with the Yin Thunder Force. The power of the sword increased tremendously. Suddenly, it was as if it could cut open the sky. It rushed forward and attacked. The superb swordsmanship was unstoppable. Chen Zong was hit directly. The defense of the 9 Heaven Soldier armor could not withstand it and was instantly cut open. Even though its power was reduced by 10%, the remaining 90% of its power was enough to break through the defense, tear open his skin, and injure him. If Chen Zong had not dodged in time, the sword would have caused more than just a slight injury. You've angered me. The ancient beast roared and immediately shapeshifted. In an instant, the ancient beast's body swelled up and changed into an ape-man. Its fur was short and black in color. Each strand of hair stood up like countless steel needles. Its aura became even more violent, brutal, and direct, repelling everything around it. As the ancient beast transformed into a ferocious ape-man, the wound caused by Chen Zong's sword quickly healed. After transforming, the ancient beast clansman's strength, speed, defense, and self-healing abilities would be significantly enhanced. This was the true appearance of the ancient beast clan. It was the appearance of their true strength. Normally, they would transform into a human-like appearance just to make it easier for them to move around. Boom, 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 boom. His fists became more violent and faster. Every punch was like a black iron meteorite piercing through the sky, forming a meteorite-like bombardment. The terrifying fist force even shattered and turned the surrounding ground into powder. Under such an attack, Chen Zong found it difficult to get close because the power was too strong. It wasn't something that Chen Zong could withstand. If it weren't for the fact that Chen Zong had cultivated a body refining technique in the past 10 years and his physique had been strengthened a lot, he would have had no choice but to retreat under such a terrifying attack. Heart fire! Chen Zong muttered to himself. Instantly, layers of heart flame phantoms burned and covered Chen Zong's body. His entire body seemed to be bathed in layers of illusory flames, swaying endlessly and emitting a boundless halo. Power, speed. His strength and swordsmanship became even more powerful in an instant. This ancient beast's attacks were even more ferocious after he shapeshifted. He was faster and more powerful. However, he was not flawless. Chen Zong took advantage of the gaps and pushed his sword forward. He pushed the sword's sharpness to the extreme. His sword seemed to split the air as it closed in on the ancient beast once again. Kill. Die. The ancient beast roared again. He opened his fists and suddenly clapped. Then, with endless power, endless smoke and fire, they closed in on Chen Zong as if they were going to squash him into a meat patty. Chen Zong did not panic in the face of danger. He moved and slashed with his long sword, bursting with an extremely strong power. It seemed slow, but in fact it was not slow at all. With the astonishing power of 3 mountains and 5 mountains, he slashed twice, one on each side of the ancient beast. Countless streams of energy surged out, crazily rushing in all directions. The ancient beast's combined palm attack was blocked in an instant. Chenzong rushed forward and slashed at the ancient beast's neck. The extremely sharp aura made the ancient beast's expression change drastically. Roar. The powerful roar turned into rolling sound waves. Like a sound storm, it blasted toward Chenzong's face with an astonishing power. This sound wave was enough to shatter steel. Slash. With a slash of his sword, he split the sound wave and continued to attack the ancient beast. At the crucial moment, the ancient beast avoided the vital point on its neck and gathered all of its power to its shoulders. Layer after layer of power overlapped, and every single strand of hair was suffused with astonishing radiance. It was incomparably cold like steel, and its defensive power was raised to the extreme. The light green sword light was filled with wisps of gray. There seemed to be an invisible ripple of flowing light that slashed at the ancient beast like water. One by one, the needle-like hairs were sliced and shredded. However, the sword light was also blocked by layers of resistance. The slash of the sword was instantly blocked by the ancient beast's stacked strength and strong physical defense. However, the ancient beast's expression changed instantly. He felt an invisible force rushing toward him and attacking his spiritual will. Although it did not break his divine will, it affected him somewhat and forced him to defend himself. At the same time, he was distracted and could not control all his strength to attack Chenzong. Divine Will Attack. This was the Divine Will Guidance art that Chenzong had received from the Tao Alliance 10 years ago. During these 10 years, Chenzong had been constantly comprehending and cultivating it. The Divine Will Guidance art could not strengthen one's own divine will. However, the depletion of divine will would speed up the recovery of the divine will. Additionally, when one cultivated it to a certain level, they would be able to guide the divine will and integrate it into their attack. Chenzong was able to guide the power of the divine will and integrate it into his swordsmanship, so that his swordsmanship would have the power of the divine will. Of course, this was only a small part of the power of the divine will. It was not even 10% of its power. For example, under normal circumstances, Chenzong could only guide 1% of the divine will into his swordsmanship. It sounded very advanced, but the divine will attack was actually not that profound. It was just an application of the power of the divine will. Moreover, this application was only useful for cultivators with powerful divine wills. The so-called cultivators with powerful divine wills referred to those whose divine wills were stronger than their own cultivation level. Using the 3 trial grounds of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court as a standard, for example, the strength of the 3rd level of the Battle Tower corresponded to the divine will of the 3rd level of the Thousand Fantasy House. However, there were also cultivators who had the strength to pass the 3rd level of the Battle Tower but did not have the strength of the divine will to pass the 3rd level of the Thousand Fantasy House. In that case, mastering the divine will attack was actually not very useful. This was because even if it was used, it would not cause any impact or influence on the divine will of others. Of course, it would be effective if it was used against someone weaker than oneself. However, if the opponent was weaker than oneself, then what was the use of the impact of the divine will? It would just be a waste of time. After all, mastering the application of the divine will was not a simple matter. It required a lot of time and effort to study it. One also needed to have the corresponding talent. Otherwise, it would really be a waste of time and effort. The application of the divine will was only suitable for cultivators whose divine wills were stronger than their cultivation level. This was because it was an advantage that had to be used reasonably. Chenzong's 1% of the power of the divine will would naturally not be able to truly harm the opponent's divine will. However, it could cause an impact and cause the opponent to be distracted for an instant and unable to attack him. Kill. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chen Zong struck again with his sword. With Chen Zong's speed, it was enough for him to seize the opportunity and slash out with an extremely sharp sword. A battle between experts only lasted for a moment, just like what was happening now. In terms of strength alone, Chen Zong was indeed inferior to the Sky Pride from the ancient beast tribe. However, he was not inferior in any other aspect. In fact, he was even superior, such as his speed and swordsmanship. Now that a portion of the impact of the divine will had interfered with the opponent, causing the opponent's divine will to be shaken. This caused the opponent to be unable to exert his full strength. This strike was so sharp that by the time the ancient beast tribe member reacted, it was already too late for him to block or dodge. In a hurry, the ancient beast tribe member threw out a punch and fought with his life on the line. He was very decisive and ruthless. A sharp and cold light flashed across Chen Zong's eyes. However, he had no intention of dodging. Instead, he fully activated his body-enhancing skill and planned to take the blow head-on. Slash. In an instant, the sword struck the ancient beast tribe member's neck. The powerful and direct sword light immediately broke through the ancient beast tribe member's defense and severed his neck. At the same time, Chen Zong's chest was also hit by the ancient beast tribe member's punch. Although it was weakened by 10%, the remaining 90% of its power was still terrifying. With a bang like the roar of a drum, the ancient beast tribe member's punch broke through Chen Zong's protective energy and landed on his chest. It was as if it was going to shatter him. Retreat. Chen Zong's body swayed and he staggered back a few steps. Every step he took seemed to break the ground, leaving deep footprints. His face was slightly pale, and a trickle of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He was injured. Chen Zong was still injured by that punch. Fortunately, the ancient beast tribe member's counterattack was a little hasty and did not use his full strength. After being weakened, it finally hit Chen Zong. Chen Zong's body-enhancing skill was not bad, so he was only slightly injured. If Chen Zong did not have body-enhancing skills, this punch could have killed him. That would be equivalent to perishing together. Seeing that his punch did not kill Chen Zong, the ancient beast tribe member was unwilling to die. Your strength is not bad. You forced me to use 2 secret skills and the divine will attack. Unfortunately, you still can't force me to use my full strength. Chen Zong seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to the dead ancient beast tribe member. No one knew how much Chen Zong had improved in those 10 years with the help of the Heart Sutra. In addition to his amazing talent, even if the ancient beast tribe member had cultivated for 100 years, he still could not compare. Chapter 2461. Cultivation time was one of the factors to measure a cultivator's strength, but it was not the standard. It was only one of the factors. Besides, there were other factors such as talent and opportunity. The ancient beast was indeed a top genius and had cultivated for a longer time than Chen Zong. However, Chen Zong's talent was more outstanding. With the help of the Heart Sutra, he could make up for the difference in cultivation time. In addition, there was the means. The strength of Chen Zong's divine will was one of his strengths. When he used it, he turned the tide of the battle and secured victory. 5 points. It was really difficult to obtain points. 1 point could only be obtained by killing one person. The same person could only be killed once. Moreover, the Battle of Death Ruins was not small. There were 1,000 people. It would only be considered over if everyone died once. Unknowingly, it increased the difficulty. Chen Zong was not in a hurry to continue hunting other disciples. Instead, he used his cultivation sutra to recover his strength. He had used up a lot of energy in the battle just now. He had to recover to his peak state first. Otherwise, if he encountered a strong enemy, he would be vulnerable if he was not strong enough. Although according to the rules, everyone was destined to die once before the disciples' meet would end, they could choose how they wanted to die. Even if he had to die, Chernzong did not want to die simply. At least, he wanted to die in the hands of a stronger opponent. However, Chernzong did not take any elixirs to recover his strength. These elixirs were not bad. Although he had accumulated some over the past 30 years, they were not much. Good steel should be used on the blade. After a while, Chernzong's strength was completely recovered. During this period, he was not disturbed. The Battle of Death Ruins was not small. There were 1,000 people. It was not easy to find the others. Chernzong moved again. He turned into a gust of wind and spread out his divine will to find the whereabouts of the other disciples. The Battle of Death Ruins was full of ruins. It was the result of countless battles and would not be restored. Many figures were moving through the ruins. Some of them were dashing and emitting a dazzling aura. It was as if they were telling others, "I'm here. Come and find me." There were also some who retracted their auras and flew past at lightning speed. There were also some who completely concealed their auras and used the terrain to hide their tracks so that they wouldn't be discovered by others. Once they discovered others, they would erupt with their fastest speed and hunt them down. In this place, because one would not really die, there was no need to hold back. After all, this was the disciples' meet, a competition between the 9 Heavens Imperial Court's spirit condensation disciples. If one were to hold back, then one might not be able to display one's abilities to the fullest and obtain a better ranking. And these were all related to the opinions of the higher-ups, rewards, and so on. Therefore, the most correct way of doing things was to bring out all of his abilities and compete with the other disciples to his heart's content. Of course, this didn't mean that he had to act blindly. Instead, he had to bring out what he was best at and display his most outstanding aspect. He didn't have to expose his weaknesses, as that would only lower the evaluation of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court's experts. At this very moment, the group of experts from the 9 Heavens Imperial Court were all staring at everything that was happening in the ruins of the deathly battle. They were all aware of who was performing well and who was not. Time passed. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, in the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. In the ruins of the deathly battle, there was no distinction between day and night. The sky was also gloomy, extremely oppressive. However, everyone could feel the passage of time here. Everyone's 9 heavens rings carried elixirs that could restore energy, as well as elixirs that could eliminate hunger and restore physical strength like fresh water elixirs and meat essence elixirs. Fresh water elixirs and meat essence elixirs were provided by the 9 Heavens Imperial Court, and they could be supplied in unlimited quantities. Of course, there was no need to do so. Generally, 1 fresh water elixir and 1 meat essence elixir a day was enough to maintain daily consumption. No matter how intense the consumption was, it would only be 2 or 3 more elixirs. For example, Chernzong had accumulated thousands of fresh water elixirs and meat essence elixirs in the 9 heavens rings over the past 30 years, enough to last him for quite a long period of time. In these 10 days, Chernzong had fought more than 10 battles and won every battle. In every battle, he didn't use his full strength. In this way, Chernzong obtained 19 points. In these 10 days, sometimes when he was lucky, he could kill 3 people a day. Sometimes when he was unlucky, he could only kill 1. His figure drifted past like a breeze, but Chernzong didn't use his full speed, because that would increase the consumption of energy. Suddenly, Chernzong's figure paused, and his eyes became sharp. It was as if there was a flash of light shooting through the air, directly locking onto a figure 1,000 meters in front of him. That figure was attacking and killing a disciple with 1 strike of his staff. It was as easy as breaking bamboo. "West's staff," Chernzong called out in a low voice. His paused figure flashed again, and his speed increased again, like a gust of wind blowing past. West's staff. A member of the Origin clan, a top prodigy of the Origin clan. 10 years ago, Chernzong had fought with him. Although he used all his strength, he was still defeated in the end. After that, Chernzong didn't challenge West's staff. Now, 10 years had passed. Since they met in the ruins of the Battle of Death, it was naturally a battle. After killing that disciple with one strike of his staff and obtaining 1 point, West's staff also sensed the aura. He turned around and saw Chernzong. He was slightly startled, and then a smile appeared on his face. He had a deep impression of this human. He was obviously from the third sequence void. He was obviously a human without any special talent, but he was able to defeat many members of the Origin clan. He even fought fiercely with him, and in the end, he had to use the power of the Tao pattern to defeat him. In other words, if it wasn't for that 1 year of seclusion, when he happened to comprehend and condense a Tao pattern, the outcome of the battle with Chernzong would have been hard to predict. How could he not have a deep impression of such a person? Now that they met here, it was natural for him to have another battle. Human, since we've met and we're going to die anyway, let me end you. West's staff laughed and completely turned around. However, he didn't charge forward. Instead, he stood quietly in place, waiting for Chernzong to come closer. The distance of 1,000 meters was actually very short. With Chernzong's explosive speed, he could cross it in just 1 or 2 breaths. Close in. A light green sword light bloomed in an instant, condensing into a line and piercing through the air. It was an extremely fast sword, but it also condensed an indescribable sharpness. West's staff was secretly shocked, and at the same time, his pupils shrank. From this sword, he could see that Chernzong's strength was much stronger than it was 10 years ago. This is interesting. West's staff grinned and immediately raised the dark golden staff in his hand. Then let me see how strong you are now. Let's see if you're qualified to make me use my full strength like I did 10 years ago. After 10 years, West's staff's improvement was astonishing. After all, he was an Origin clan member and a top prodigy among them. He had a great innate advantage, and with Primordial's nurturing, he was improving almost every moment. His strength after 10 years would definitely be able to defeat his strength from 10 years ago. If this human was too weak, he would be disappointed. Of course, West's staff didn't think that this human's improvement in the past 10 years would surpass his, or even catch up with him. It would be amazing if this human could improve half of his. This was because most of the demon tribe and heavenly human tribe couldn't do this, let alone a human who was only a third-rank void realm. That staff smashed down directly. It was as if it had stirred up wind and thunder. It directly exploded with an extremely terrifying might, falling down from above. Its power was astonishing to the extreme. Suffocation. Under the staff, Chernzong felt as if a dark golden meteorite was falling from the sky, as if it could shatter everything below. Compared to 10 years ago, he was much more powerful. With a loud bang, Chernzong's body collapsed. A huge crater was formed on the ground. Countless cracks spread out, and waves of earth rose up. A light green sword suddenly appeared behind West's staff, cutting horizontally in the air with astonishing sharpness. You've become even faster. West's staff seemed to be a little talkative. As he spoke, he swung his staff horizontally, as if he was sweeping away an army. It carried an astonishing force that was extremely heavy and vigorous. The great Tao that West's staff had mastered was the great Tao of Earth. It was extremely heavy and vigorous, and its power was even stronger. Chernzong didn't plan to fight it head-on at all, as that would be very disadvantageous to him. As for using the Tao domain to suppress it, it was also ineffective. Chernzong realized that although there was also a Tao domain in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, it was different from the Void. In the Void, the Tao domain was released outwards. Here, the Tao domain was restrained. Of course, this restraint could only be truly achieved in the third realm. As for the second realm, it was only in the brewing stage. Although it was in the brewing stage, they could naturally resist the suppression of the Tao domain. The only thing that was truly effective was the sword world. However, the suppression power of the sword world was also imperceptibly weakened. At the end of the day, there was still a difference between Chen Zong and the cultivators of the universe. Only when one reached the third realm would that difference truly disappear. Turning into a breeze, Chen Zong dodged again and attacked again. He displayed his maximum speed and even used the secret technique of the heart flame. The immense power of the mind was enough to support Chen Zong to use the secret technique of the heart flame for a very long time. He was stronger and faster. Fight. It was an extremely intense battle. After attacking several times in a row, he still couldn't do anything to Chen Zong. Shi Staff also knew that this human's improvement over the past 10 years was not weak. He really had to fight with his full strength, which was quite similar to what happened 10 years ago. In that case, let's fight to our heart's content. Shi Staff let out a long whistle. His aura skyrocketed in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the dark golden staff emitted a dazzling light, bursting forth with layers of halos. It seemed that the staff had expanded by one size and was even more powerful. When he attacked, every strike of the staff seemed to be able to shatter a mountain. Not only did it have an extremely astonishing offensive power, but it also affected the surroundings, creating an invisible pressure. This pressure would affect Chen Zong's figure. Vaguely, Chen Zong actually felt that this kind of pressure was somewhat similar to the Tao domain. Chapter 2462. Within the eighth heaven of the nine heavens imperial court, there was an incomparably majestic hall. Numerous gigantic figures that were 100 meters tall stood in 4 directions. Every single one of them exuded a boundless aura that was incomparably majestic, deep, and boundless. There were more than a dozen of these figures, almost 20 of them. They were all experts of the nine heavens imperial court. To be able to stay in the 8th layer of heaven was already an incredible existence. Cultivators like Lin Ming and Ao Wu were not qualified to stay in the 8th layer of heaven. The 20 figures came from various races. Among them, there were humans as well, but most of them were from the origin race. What's up with that human? One of the origin race experts stared at one of the many images and said in surprise, "He can actually fight such an intense battle with that little guy from the origin race. It's a little unbelievable." Let me ask. That little guy from the origin race is called Shi Zhang. He's one of the more outstanding prodigies of the origin race in this year's cohort. It's said that he can make it into the top 10 this year. Another origin race expert said slowly, "As for that human, he should be an incredible human because he's from the third sequence void. 10 years ago, he fought with Shi Zhang. Although he lost in the end, he still displayed extraordinary abilities." Oh, a human from the third sequence void actually has such abilities. The other experts were all surprised. They were all high-level experts of the nine heavens imperial court. Naturally, they would not pay too much attention to the disciples unless it was extremely special. So special that it piqued their curiosity and drew their attention. After all, they had other important matters to attend to besides cultivation. How would they have the time to pay special attention to a group of disciples? A human from the third sequence void is indeed not bad. Zheng Yuan, it looks like there's another good junior among the humans this time. It seems so. The one who was called Zheng Yuan was a human. He was also the only human expert here. He had another identity, the leader of the Tao Alliance. After a few breaths, he spoke again. "This little guy is from the Tao Alliance. I didn't expect there to be another outstanding junior in the Tao Alliance." Just now, he had contacted the other members of the Tao Alliance and learned about this. While the high-level experts were talking, The battle between Chen Zong and Shi Zhang was getting more and more intense. Chen Zong was intoxicated by the feeling of unleashing his swordsmanship to his heart's content. With the sword in his hand, he had complete control and control over it. He could use it as he pleased, and the changes in weight and speed were as he wished. In terms of absolute strength and attack power, Shi Zhang was better than Chen Zong. However, Shi Zhang soon discovered that Chen Zong's swordsmanship was too superb. Shi Zhang knew from the battle 10 years ago that Chen Zong's swordsmanship was superb, and he had rich combat experience. 10 years later, his swordsmanship had improved a lot, and Shi Zhang found it difficult to deal with him. After a fierce battle, Shi Zhang realized that it was very difficult for him to compete with his opponent's swordsmanship with his staff skills. Although his staff skills had improved a lot in the past 10 years, his opponent's swordsmanship had improved even more. He was truly a genius in swordsmanship. Since that was the case, Shi Zhang decided to use his strength to suppress his opponent. Shi Zhang unleashed his secret technique again, and the power of his staff skills suddenly increased by 70%. It was even more terrifying. Every strike of his staff carried the power of an embryonic Tao domain. It suppressed the surroundings and increased the pressure on Chen Zong. It made it harder for Chen Zong to move. However, Chen Zong's superb swordsmanship still allowed him to contend with Shi Zhang. He was not at a disadvantage for a while, but at the same time, it was difficult for him to close in on Shi Zhang. He could only move around and look for an opportunity. Superb techniques could allow the weak to defeat the strong, but powerful strength could also defeat 10 people. There was no such thing as absolute strength. Everything depended on how the person used it. If they used it well, they would be strong. If they did not use it well, they would be weak. Seizing the moment of opportunity, Chen Zong closed in and attacked with his sword. The speed of his sword was so fast that Shi Zhang could not react in time. Moreover, the sharpness of his swordsmanship was astonishing. When it reached him, Shi Zhang was shocked. He felt as if he would be torn apart by the sword. However, when Chen Zong's sword hit Shi Zhang's body, he realized that there was a layer of resistance that blocked the sword. That resistance was extremely tough and difficult to break through. In just an instant, the long rod of the West staff slammed through the air. Its power was incomparably tyrannical. It was as if a mountain was pressing down, wanting to shatter Chen Zong. Retreat. In an instant, Chen Zong immediately retreated. At the same time, he saw that there seemed to be a halo flashing on Shi Zhang's body. The halo was as thin as a piece of paper, but it was surprisingly tough. Chen Zong recognized it at a glance. The 9 Mystic Protection Technique. Chen Zong said to himself. That was one of the 3 supreme secret skills of the secret pavilion, the 9 Mystic Protection Technique. It was a defensive secret skill. After mastering it, it would naturally form a thin layer of defense on the surface of one's skin. Once it was attacked, it would be automatically activated to defend against the attack. As one of the 3 supreme mystic techniques of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court, and the only defensive mystic technique among the 3 supreme mystic techniques, it was naturally very shocking. It was normal that his sword couldn't slice it open. The powerful staff technique and the amazing defense of the 9 Mystic Protection Technique put Shi Zhang in an invincible position. Although Shi Zhang had only mastered the first layer of the 9 Mystic Protection Technique and condensed a protective force, it was enough to block Chen Zong's swordsmanship attack. Human, do you have any more powerful moves? If not, you will definitely lose this time, Shi Zhang said with a smile. Chen Zong stared at Shi Zhang. Sure enough, after 10 years, both he and Shi Zhang had improved a lot. Fortunately, he had passed through the 3rd level of the 3 great trial grounds and had chosen a supreme secret technique. In the past 10 years, he had also cultivated it to some extent. 9 layers of mixed killing. Among the 3 supreme secret skills, this was a secret skill that focused on attacking power. He drew his sword. Chen Zong moved again. He became one with his sword and once again swung his superb swordsmanship. Shi Zhang's staff came down, but Chen Zong dodged it. Then, he rushed forward and swung his sword again. It seemed like a brief exchange, but in fact, Chen Zong had used more than 10 different swordsmanship skills to get rid of the influence of Shi Zhang's staff technique and directly closed in on him. The Heart Sutra allowed Chen Zong to discover his shortcomings in battle and improve himself at the fastest speed. In other words, Chen Zong was a person who could constantly improve himself in battle. That was terrifying. He swung his sword again. This time, Shi Zhang still could not dodge it. He could only resist it with his own defense. When the sword hit Shi Zhang again, it cut through his armor and hit the protective power of the 9 Mysteries body protection technique. Chen Zong felt that amazing toughness again. 9-fold mixed kill. He muttered to himself. It seemed that a sword shadow appeared in an instant and merged with the sword to launch a second attack. It was extremely fast. The first slash was the slash of Chen Zong's sword. The second slash was the slash of the sword shadow that had been condensed in an instant. The interval between the first attack and the second attack was very short, almost at the same time. Moreover, the power of the second attack was exactly the same as that of the first attack. This was the secret of the supreme secret skill, 9-fold mixed kill. The 9-fold mixed kill could launch up to 9 more attacks. Using the sword as an example, it meant that there were 9 more sword shadows in a row. Each sword shadow's power was the same as the first one. If the 9-fold mixed kill was cultivated to the advanced level, one attack would be accompanied by 9 sword shadows. It was equivalent to launching 10 attacks of the same power in an instant. It was very terrifying. But now, Chen Zong could only launch the first attack, which was to condense a sword shadow to accompany his sword. It was equivalent to launching 2 attacks at the same point. Any defense had an upper limit. The interval between the sword shadows of the 9-fold mixed kill was very short. Although it was not the same as doubling the attack, it was very close. The first attack was blocked by the protective power of the 9 Mysteries body protection technique. However, after blocking Chen Zong's 10 attacks, the protective power was also in a state of extreme. As the sword shadows chased after him, the protective power was immediately broken and directly attacked Shi Zhang. His body was split open and blood splattered. 9-fold mixed kill. Shi Zhang was not killed directly because the moment his protective power was broken, Shi Zhang reacted quickly and immediately retreated. Therefore, he was not seriously injured. He had mastered the 9 Mysteries body protection technique, while his opponent had mastered the 9-fold mixed kill. In other words, his 9 Mysteries body protection technique could not block the power of his swordsmanship. He felt that this battle seemed to be more difficult than the one 10 years ago. However, Shi Zhang was not afraid at all. Instead, he showed a smile. In an instant, an earthen yellow vein pattern appeared behind him. Compared to 10 years ago, that vein pattern seemed to be even more solid. The might it emitted also seemed to be a bit stronger. Dao pattern. The Dao pattern of the Earth Dao. In an instant, the Dao pattern integrated into the long staff. The long staff suddenly trembled and its power surged. Its aura was extremely shocking. Boom. When the staff arrived, its power increased by a lot, becoming extremely terrifying. It was as if everything would be shattered under this force. Terrifying. Extremely terrifying. Chen Zong's expression was extremely solemn. Too powerful. Compared to 10 years ago, it was much more powerful. Moreover, the embryonic form of the doctrine domain was much more powerful. Its influence on the surroundings was obviously more intense. Without hesitation, Chen Zong activated the sword world. Although his swordsmanship was excellent and far surpassed Shi Zhang's staff skills, the difference in power was too great. It was as if it had exceeded the limit. The sword world activated and covered all directions. Rays of sword light condensed in an instant and 10 swords merged into one. In an instant 200 rays of sword light appeared. Compared to 10 years ago, there were 100 more rays. Each ray of sword light was extremely powerful. Kill. 20 rays of sword light formed a wave and immediately bombarded Xizhang. Come on. Xizhang's face was filled with excitement. The feeling of unleashing his full power was too wonderful. Every attack was extremely powerful, as if it could shatter a mountain. Attack. Attack to your heart's content. Attack with all your might. Fight, fight, fight. Chen Zong clenched his right hand. In an instant, the bracelet turned into the 9 heavens soldier sword. His body flew out. Chapter 2463. Chen Zong's sword world had become even more powerful, and the pressure it brought to Xizhang had also increased. However, under Xizhang's full power, the power of the staff was too strong. When the sword light arrived, it would be shattered immediately. Even if the 200 sword lights were divided into 20 waves of continuous attacks, even if Chen Zong came close with his sword, he could not do anything to Xizhang. This was because Xizhang's attack power after the Dao pattern power was too terrifying. It had the shocking ability to defeat 10 people with brute force. Chen Zong's figure flashed, and he quickly retreated. His eyes became brighter, and his expression became more serious. Immediately, Chen Zong took a deep breath, and seemed to have made some kind of decision. His left hand's fingers were like a sword, and he directly pointed at his forehead. From top to bottom, it was as if he was going to cut his forehead open. In an instant, a shocking sharpness shot out and a rune appeared. The rune wasn't curved in the slightest, and it was completely straight. It was like the edge of a sword, and it was incomparably dazzling and shocking. As soon as it appeared, the shocking sharpness seemed to be able to pierce through the sky. Seeing the straight and sharp pattern that appeared between Chen Zong's eyebrows, Xizhang's eyes suddenly widened, and he exclaimed, "Dao pattern!" The aura fluctuation was obviously a Dao pattern, and it was a sword Dao divine pattern. Some of the powerhouses in the 8th heaven also noticed and were slightly stunned. Not bad, a human from the 3rd sequence void can actually master a Dao pattern. A real dragon is born in shallow water. The great Dao divine pattern was something that could be comprehended and mastered when one's cultivation realm reached the divine aspect realm. It was equivalent to comprehending the great Dao to a certain extent. However, a small number of prodigies could also comprehend and master a Dao pattern in the 2nd realm of the spirit condensation realm, but it was extremely rare. In short, any cultivator who could master a Dao pattern in the spirit condensation realm could be called a true top prodigy. Regardless of race, they were the top prodigies in the universe. For a human from the 3rd sequence void to be able to master a Dao pattern in the spirit condensation realm, even if it was only one Dao pattern, was already very impressive. This was because even most of the origin race could not do it. Only a few of the top prodigies of the origin race could do it. There was no doubt that Chen Zong had attracted the attention of the powerhouses of the 8th heaven. This strand of sword Dao divine crest was the result of Chen Zong ceaselessly comprehending, cultivating, and ceaselessly improving his attainments in the sword Dao during these past 10 years. It represented that Chen Zong had truly stepped onto the threshold of the sword Dao. Even though he'd only taken a small step onto the threshold, there was an obvious difference when compared to before. Strands of energy seemed to be gushing out from the sword mark between his eyebrows. It was extremely sharp. Chen Zong turned the sword in his hand back into a bracelet. The power of the sword runes spread out and merged into the sword world. In an instant, the pressure of the sword world doubled, immediately causing the west staff to feel suppressed. At the same time, the power of each ray of sword light was doubled. In this way, the west staff could no longer shatter the sword light with a single strike. The result of this was that he had to face wave after wave of sword light bombardment. It became more and more strenuous for him, and the pressure on him increased dramatically. The West Staff directly became a target. He could only deal with Chen Zong's sword light attacks tirelessly. In the end, he could not hold on and was killed by the sword light. Even in death, the West Staff did not have time to express any emotions. Only his eyes were filled with shock. In the battle 10 years ago, he had won. In the battle 10 years later, he had lost. Oh, this little human actually won. Amazing. Zheng Yuan, your Dao Alliance is really lucky this time. The leader of the Dao Alliance, Zheng Yuan, let out a hearty laugh. He was truly satisfied, because it had been many years since there had been a human junior who had made his eyes light up like this. The last person he had seen was probably the one from 10,000 years ago. Now, he was a very powerful fighter in the Dao Alliance, and he was also very famous in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. It would be very beneficial for the Dao Alliance to have a few more prodigies of the human race like him. The Dao Alliance's maintenance and development could not only rely on himself and those of the same generation. They also needed powerful juniors. Otherwise, if there was a shortage of juniors, the Dao Alliance might collapse. After all, the Dao Alliance was almost at the bottom of the 9 great factions. After killing the West Staff, Chen Zong smiled. Of course, after 10 years, his strength had increased more than the West Staff. However, Chen Zong did not have an easy time in this battle. He almost used all his strength to defeat the West Staff. His strength was also greatly depleted, and there was not much left. He hurriedly took out an elixir and consumed it to quickly recover his depleted strength. Chen Zong then circulated his cultivation technique to speed up the recovery of his strength. He left while recovering his strength. After all, the battle here had caused a huge commotion, and it might attract other disciples. With his current state, if he encountered a powerful disciple, he might not be a match for them. As expected, not long after Chen Zong left, a stream of light approached in an instant and turned into an Origin clan member. That Origin clan member's eyes seemed to be flickering with a faint green light. His aura seemed to be restrained, but it also seemed to be released. It was very shocking. Moreover, his feet were off the ground. Although it was only 3 inches, it was still a shocking display of strength. One had to know that those in the spirit focus realm could not fly. Even those in the divine phase realm could only hover in the air for a short period of time. A pair of eyes that flickered with a pale green brilliance swept across the area. After sizing up the surroundings, a dense cold smile hung from the corners of his mouth. His body flashed and once again transformed into a green light figure. He actually rushed swiftly in the direction that Chen Zong had left in. His speed was shocking and his presence was extremely soft. This little guy seems to be the Origin clan prodigy from the previous generation, Green Nightmare. An Origin clan expert from the 8th layer of heaven laughed. That's right, it's him. He was born with a wind spiritual body. In the previous disciple competition, he was ranked 11. He hasn't made a breakthrough yet, so he should be aiming for first place. There's a big difference between the rewards for being ranked 11th and 1st. It seems that the little guy from the human clan has been targeted. He's going to be in danger. No one thought that Chen Zong would be a match for Green Nightmare. After all, Green Nightmare was much stronger than Shi Zhang. In the previous disciple competition, he had been ranked 11. After 100 years of cultivation, he was also born with a strong constitution like the wind spiritual body. After 100 years of cultivation, even if his progress was slow, he was constantly improving. However, that little guy from the human clan was not bad. If he had been born in the universe, he might have been even more outstanding. However, it was very rare for a real dragon to be born in shallow water. Even a real dragon would often have some shortcomings due to the limitations of the environment. It might be possible to make up for it, but it required more time and opportunities. As Chen Zong flew away, he quickly recovered his strength. At the same time, he recalled the battle with Xizhang. That battle had not been easy. It could even be said that it had been very difficult. After 10 years, his strength had increased a lot, and so had Xizhang. The embryonic form of a Dao domain. Chen Zong thought to himself. Dao domains existed in the universe and the void. However, as he cultivated and broadened his knowledge, Chen Zong also understood that the void's application of Dao domains was actually very simple and rather crude. The void's initial application of Dao domains was to release it to suppress the opponent. The more advanced application was the second level of Dao domains, which gave rise to a more unique power. As for the higher levels, Chen Zong was not clear because he was still far from reaching them. As for the application of Dao domains in the universe, it was directly integrated into martial arts, which was more profound. Chen Zong had not mastered it yet. After all, he was a newcomer and there were too many aspects that he needed to improve in. Even with the help of the Heart Sutra, he could not take care of everything in a short period of time. The battle with Xizhang allowed Chen Zong to see an application of the embryonic form of a Dao domain integrated into the staff art. It caused every staff strike to affect the surroundings, creating a greater pressure. With contact, Chen Zong had an opportunity. It would be easier for him to gain entry into the Dao domain. Not long after, Chen Zong's exhausted strength was completely recovered. Vaguely, Chen Zong felt that his cultivation seemed to have reached a critical point. He seemed to be only a hair's breadth away from a breakthrough. Originally, after 10 years of cultivation, Chen Zong had not only cultivated the first level of the annihilation force to the greater success realm, but he had also taken a big step forward, nearing the perfection realm. However, there was still a gap. However, after entering this place, there had been many battles. Under the continuous battles, his strength had been exhausted and recovered, causing the cool breeze force to improve slightly. Although the improvement was insignificant, it was closer to the perfection realm. Chen Zong felt that perhaps after a few more battles, his cultivation might usher in an opportunity for a breakthrough. As for whether it would be 2 or 3 battles, or even 5 or 6 battles, Chen Zong did not know. He would only know when he really reached that step. Suddenly, Chen Zong's expression changed slightly, and a smile hung on the corner of his mouth. I was just thinking about a battle, and now my wish is about to come true, Chen Zong said to himself. He turned around, and his eyes condensed an amazing sharpness. In an instant, he shot out as if he could pierce through the void. Under Chen Zong's gaze, a green shadow appeared and approached at an amazing speed. Although the speed was so fast that it surprised Chen Zong, it did not cause an amazing momentum. On the contrary, the sound was faint. It was as swift as a gust of wind. How can it be? Chen Zong focused his gaze and saw more clearly. He found that the green shadow was flying 3 inches above the ground, as if it was weightless and was not limited by the realm. It should be noted that he could not fly even at full speed. He could only maintain a distance of 100 meters above the ground. That was all. Could it be that it was not a disciple participating in the disciples' assembly? As this thought flashed through his mind, the green shadow approached even closer. It directly entered the range of 100 meters, allowing Chen Zong's sharp eyes to see it more clearly. It was indeed a person, a member of the Origin clan. The symbol of the Origin clan was very obvious: silver hair and double pupils. However, this Origin clan member seemed to be a little special. The ends of his silver hair were light green, as if they were constantly emitting a faint light. There seemed to be a touch of green in his double pupils. This Origin clan member looked indifferent. Without saying anything, he flew directly towards Chen Zong. Chapter 2464. Extreme Speed. In the blink of an eye, he crossed hundreds of meters and appeared in front of Chen Zong. Fast. Too fast. It was so fast that Chen Zong felt his hair stand on end. For a moment it was hard for him to react. However, Chen Zong was well trained and had experienced countless battles. His subconscious mind exploded in an instant. He unsheathed his sword. The sword radiance streaked across the sky like a pool of autumn water flowing in the void, emanating an astonishing chill. The light cyan sword radiance slashed horizontally, as if it could cut through everything. However, the Origin's expression did not change. His face was indifferent, and he had no intention of dodging. Instead, he flicked his finger. A wisp of cyan chi condensed at the tip of his finger and struck the sword radiance. The sound of metal clashing rang out in an instant, and sparks seemed to fly out. The light cyan sword light was shattered in an instant, and Chen Zong immediately felt a powerful and sharp force coming at him. It was as sharp as the edge of a blade. Chen Zong's superb swordsmanship erupted in an instant. With a twist of his wrist, he pushed his sword forward. At the same time, the sword dispelled this tyrannical force and turned into a pale green flowing light, piercing directly towards the opponent. Chen Zong displayed all the skills of swordsmanship, such as stabbing, slicing, flicking, cutting, slashing, and so on. Speed, sharpness, weight, hardness, gentleness, and so on. Chen Zong integrated all the mysteries of swordsmanship into his swordsmanship. A hint of surprise flashed across the Origin's eyes. His swordsmanship was so superb that it seemed to be in the top 3 of his previous opponents. But so what? In the face of absolute speed and strength, even a superb swordsmanship would be useless. Green Nightmare waved his fingers delicately and nimbly. He accurately blocked each of Chen Zong's attacks. No matter how superb Chen Zong's swordsmanship was, he could not break through the defense of Green Nightmare's fingers. This was because Green Nightmare was too fast. He was much faster than Chen Zong. Moreover, Green Nightmare's martial arts attainments were also superb. Shi Zhang could not compare to him. Although this was only the beginning of the fight, Chen Zong was sure that Green Nightmare's strength and martial arts skills were far superior to Shi Zhang's. A strong enemy. An incredibly powerful enemy. However, Chen Zong didn't feel the slightest fear. On the contrary, a trace of excitement grew in the depths of his heart, grew crazily, and then burst out again, turning into a soaring fighting spirit and a sword will that split the sky. The sword intent on his body became increasingly pure and powerful. "You have some skills." The Green Nightmare spoke for the first time. Its voice was erratic and unpredictable. "Then, take this." At the same time, dozens of green finger forces spread out. They were densely packed and surrounded Chen Zong from all directions. All of them pointed at Chen Zong. Every finger force was extremely fast and contained amazing power, which made Chen Zong's heart skip a beat. He swung his sword. Resist. The dozens of finger forces were all blocked by Chen Zong's excellent swordsmanship, but the long sword was still vibrating, and Chen Zong was also forced to retreat. The remaining finger force continued to rush into Chen Zong's body, causing continuous impact. So strong. Chen Zong was shocked. His opponent's finger technique was too powerful. Not only was it extremely fast, but it was also terrifyingly direct with continuous force. Immediately after, the other party pointed out with his finger again. Dozens of green finger forces instantly gathered into one and directly shot out. It was clearly just one finger force, but it had the astonishing power of a huge spear piercing through the air. Even if it was a mountain, it would be directly smashed into pieces. Moreover, the speed of this green finger force was extremely fast. It was like a stream of light that directly pierced through the air, causing Chen Zong's hair to stand on end. He was unable to dodge, and could only rely on his well-trained instincts to break out in an instant and slash out with his sword. This sword was infused with the mystery of hardness and several other mysteries, so it exploded with amazing power. It was the most powerful direct attack. Moreover, Chunzong also unleashed his maximum combat strength, even using the ninefold mixed killing secret skill. However, Chunzong's sword was directly shattered the moment it came into contact with the finger force. The sword bounced up high, and Chunzong's body flew back quickly, his chi and blood trembling. The ninefold mixed killing secret skill was very advanced, and it was compatible with the Yin Thunder Force. In other words, Chunzong's third-level Yin Thunder Force would also be enhanced by the ninefold mixed killing secret skill by 30%. Even so, he was only able to shatter his opponent's finger. He was also directly forced back, his chi and blood surging. "You're not bad. You can block my finger with 50% of my power." Green Nightmare was even more surprised. He knew that his opponent was a human from the third sequence void. Moreover, he was a disciple of this batch, one batch lower than himself. One batch difference meant 100 years of difference. Moreover, Green Nightmare was born with a wind spiritual body. Although this kind of body was only higher than a mortal body in the universe, its power was unimaginable. At least, when cultivating a technique of the same attribute, the technique's power would be increased by a small realm. For example, Green Nightmare cultivated the annihilation force of the Nine Heaven Breath Gale, which was compatible with his wind spiritual body. When he entered the first level, because of his wind spiritual body, the power of the clear wind force could reach the initial level. Now, Green Nightmare's annihilation force of the Nine Heaven Breath Gale had already reached the perfect level. Although he didn't break through to the second level, because of his wind spiritual body, his power was increased by a small realm, infinitely close to the second level. Moreover, because of his wind spiritual body, his power was even more powerful, majestic, and vast. His recovery speed was also faster, which was extremely shocking. Chunzong was even more shocked that his opponent used 50% of his power when he unleashed his maximum power. Sword pattern appeared. Sword world. Open. 2,000 rays of sword light condensed and turned into 200 rays in an instant. Kill. The 200 rays of sword light alternated and attacked Green Nightmare from all directions, but Green Nightmare blocked them all. Under the full power of his finger force, none of the sword light could get close to Green Nightmare. Instead, they were blocked and shattered by Green Nightmare. Immediately, a mysterious aura radiated from Green Nightmare's body. Green runes appeared in the void. As soon as the runes appeared, they radiated astonishing mysteries. There seemed to be the sound of wind whistling through the world. Chunzong could feel the breath of the wind. Wind Dao pattern. In the next moment, the wind Dao pattern fell and merged into Green Nightmare's body. When he attacked again, the power of his finger doubled. When he slashed out with his finger, it was as if he could cut through everything and directly shattered the sword light. Green Nightmare grasping the Dao pattern was within Chunzong's expectations. The sword pavilion was shattered one after another, but Chunzong could do nothing about it. The strength of this origin tribesman was much stronger than that of Shizhong. Chunzong immediately put away Sword World, because Chunzong was sure that Sword World couldn't do anything to his opponent. "Oh, you're going to admit defeat?" Green Nightmare's expression changed slightly. He didn't attack again, but his tone was indifferent. He didn't attack directly because he was also surprised by Chunzong. A human from the rank 3 origin. A third-rank Void Realm human was actually like this. That little fella of the human race. I'm afraid there's nothing he can do about it. An origin powerhouse in the 8th Heaven's main hall laughed. Not enough. Given his background, it's indeed very shocking that he has such strength. You're the first opponent to make me use my full strength, Chunzong said seriously, staring at his opponent. Before that, I want to know your name. Green Nightmare. Green Nightmare didn't hesitate and directly said his name because this human was very outstanding and qualified to know his name. Green Nightmare, I'll use my strongest move next. Light shot out of Chen Zong's eyes and then gathered inwards. A speck of green condensed in the depths of his eyes. Green Nightmare was slightly taken aback when he heard Chen Zong's words. Then, he smiled for the first time, but it looked very stiff. His aura surged endlessly. There was an indescribable nimbleness to his aura, and it also revealed an incomparably shocking sharpness. As the sword runes fluctuated, they flickered endlessly between Chen Zong's eyebrows. Power. Chen Zong activated his power to the extreme. His aura continued to spread and strengthen, becoming more and more shocking. In the past 10 years, my swordsmanship has improved by leaps and bounds. I broke through the shackles and created this move. The green light in Chen Zong's eyes continued to condense. He stared at Green Nightmare as if he wanted to see through him. His voice had a trace of sharpness. I'll name this move Vanishing Wind Slash. As soon as Chen Zong finished speaking, endless green aura surged out and entered the sword, dyeing it green. Accumulating power. Explode. He slashed with the sword. Chen Zong's figure seemed to have vanished when he became one with his sword. Together with the sword in his hand, he turned into a ray of green sword light that slashed out like a crescent moon. Its might was endless, and it was accompanied by a series of violent howls. It seemed as if a gale was howling endlessly in the world, sweeping out in all directions and causing Green Nightmare's long hair to flutter and his clothes to flutter. Slash. As the green sword ray tore through the air, the gale also paused and was directly cut apart. This move seemed to be able to split the heavens and the earth. It was so powerful that Green Nightmare's expression changed drastically. This was because the power of this move was much stronger than the previous swordsmanship. It was more than twice as strong. To think that this little brat of the human race could create such a sword by himself. The experts in the eighth heaven were astonished. A profound martial art. I didn't expect him to be able to create a profound martial art at the spirit condensation realm. No, this isn't a complete profound martial art. It's only a prototype of a profound martial art. Even a prototype of a profound martial art is extremely shocking. After all, it's more difficult to comprehend and create a prototype of a profound martial art than a Dao pattern. First there was a Dao pattern, then there was Ao Wu. Zheng Yuan, the leader of the Dao Alliance, was full of smiles. He couldn't hide it at all. When he saw Chen Zong's superb swordsmanship, he was very happy. When he saw Chen Zong's various techniques and even comprehending the sword Dao pattern, he was overjoyed. Now, when he saw Chen Zong perform a prototype of a profound martial art, he was indescribably excited. Genius. Monstrous. 10,000 years ago, that human genius wasn't even this outstanding. After all, he hadn't created a prototype of a profound martial art when he was in the spirit condensation realm. This was really the fortune of the human race and the Dao Alliance. Please remember the domain name of this book. Literature Library Mobile Version website. Chapter 2465. The wind howled, roared, and howled. The sword light shot forward, tearing the sky apart. This sword was unstoppable. It was as if nothing in the world could stop its sharpness. Green Nightmare's face lost its composure in the face of this strike. It was replaced by shock, because this strike had truly threatened him. Explode. In an instant, a second green pattern appeared in the air. It gave off an extremely mysterious aura, causing the wind to howl endlessly. The green pattern also descended and merged into Green Nightmare's body. His aura instantly skyrocketed. 2 Dao patterns. Green Nightmare, this little guy, actually condensed 2 Dao patterns. 2 wind Dao patterns. He's born with a wind spiritual body. This makes sense. Green Nightmare, who'd unleashed 2 Tao patterns, gathered all his strength and raised his right arm. Countless green forces surged forward like a storm or a tidal wave. They rushed through his arm to his finger and condensed on his index finger. His finger seemed to be made of green jade. Then the finger trembled and an indescribable force erupted. With a boom, it transformed into an arm-thick beam of green light that pierced through the air. This finger contained all of Green Nightmare's strength. The finger force and the sword light collided. There was a slight pause, and the sword light shattered. However, a sword shadow also slashed out and shattered in an instant. At the same time, cracks appeared on the green finger force and it crumbled. An extremely tyrannical power erupted in an instant like a storm or a volcanic eruption. It directly pushed Chernzong back and sent him flying. His chi and blood were shaken, and the power attacked him. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Human, you're not bad. You actually comprehended the fledgling form of a profound martial technique. Green Nightmare forced Chernzong back with one finger. There was a hint of praise in his tone. The green light in his eyes grew even more intense. Then, you should also receive my finger, the embryonic form of the profound martial art. My finger is called Cloud Piercing. The moment he finished speaking, his power was also fully condensed. In an instant, the surroundings fell into silence, as if all the wind and waves had stopped in an instant. A ray of green light broke through the air. That green light was extremely powerful, and one could vaguely see the tip of it. It looked like the tip of a finger. Point by point, it was as if it could pierce through everything and shatter everything. It was extremely fast and carried a shocking oppressive force, as if it was going to crush everything. Chernzong couldn't dodge it, so he could only burst out again and block it with his sword. Absolute wind slash. The prototype of Ao Wu collided. The gap between them was revealed once again. Chernzong's vanishing wind chop was shattered. The piercing cloud finger paused for a moment before attacking again. The difference in strength. There was also the gap between the embryonic form of Ao Wu. After all, Green Nightmare was born with outstanding talent. Moreover, he was from the previous batch and had cultivated for at least 100 years more than Chernzong. It could be said that the time Green Nightmare spent comprehending the embryonic form of Ao Wu was at least a few decades longer than Chernzong. Using a few decades of cultivation and polishing was enough to improve the embryonic form of Ao Wu to the extreme. It was only a step away from a true profound martial technique. In comparison, Chernzong's embryonic form of Ao Wu had only been comprehended for a short period of time. It was still at a relatively shallow level. The tip of his finger directly hit the blade of the sword. A terrifying force exploded and bombarded through the blade. The defense of the Ennead soldier armor was also broken. His consciousness fell into darkness in an instant. It was his first death. A third-rank Void Realm human actually required me to use cloud-piercing finger to kill him. He's indeed extraordinary. Seeing Chernzong disappear, Green Nightmare looked away and muttered in a low voice. Immediately, he turned into a gust of green wind and disappeared. Elsewhere in the Death Battle ruins, a figure condensed from the void. When the figure condensed to the extreme, he opened his eyes. Green Nightmare is indeed powerful. Chernzong let out a long breath. Although he was killed by Green Nightmare, Chernzong did not feel any hatred. This kind of death was not surprising. On the contrary, it allowed him to see an even more powerful origin prodigy. With pressure, there would be motivation. With a goal, there would be a clearer path forward. Immediately, Chernzong's expression changed. He quickly scanned his surroundings. He did not see anyone else, nor did he sense anyone else's aura. He immediately sat down with his legs crossed. The first level of the Nine Heavens Breath Gale Annihilation Force was activated at full force. However, at the same time, Chernzong also diverted part of his attention to pay attention to his surroundings to prevent anyone from approaching and attacking him. In the death battle ruins, other than himself, everyone else was considered an opponent. They were all points. Activate. As it continued to activate, the cool breeze surged endlessly. When it was activated to the extreme, it swept up wisps of cool breeze. In the next breath, the cool breeze paused slightly. When it started running again, it seemed to have broken a shackle and a limit. It became faster and sharper. Breakthrough. Complete realm. Although he had lost in the battle with Green Nightmare and died once, it was not without benefits. At least he had found an opportunity to break through. It was a blessing in disguise. After the cool breeze broke through to the complete realm, its power also increased. It became stronger, and so did Chernzong's strength. Although I've broken through and become stronger, I'm still no match for Green Nightmare. Chernzong thought to himself. Thinking back to his battle with Green Nightmare, he felt that even if he was stronger, he was still no match for Green Nightmare. Even so, Chernzong did not feel discouraged. Although he was weaker than Green Nightmare now, it did not mean that he would be able to surpass Green Nightmare in the future. For example, the battle with Shizhong 10 years ago. The result would be completely different if they fought again 10 years later. Chernzong's confidence was boosted by the breakthrough in his cultivation and the increase in his strength. With a move of his body, he immediately turned into a wisp of light green wind and flew away. His speed was several times faster than before. Under normal circumstances, spirit condensation realm experts could only master the first level of the supreme technique. As for the second level, only divine manifestation realm experts could master it. Even Green Nightmare, who had a natural wind spiritual body, could not break through this shackle. He could only rely on his natural wind spiritual body to raise his power by a small realm. In other words, Chernzong had reached the limit in terms of cultivation. He might still have room for improvement in other aspects, but it was already very difficult. To some extent, Chernzong had reached the limit of the spirit condensation realm. Before long, Chernzong encountered another disciple. Without hesitation, he attacked. In this place, except for himself, everyone could be killed. They were all walking points. Of course, in the eyes of the other disciples, he was the same. Kill or be killed. Gain points or be gained points. Fight. Chernzong's strength had increased several times. He did not use any profound martial arts, nor did he open his sword world. He defeated and killed the disciple, gaining another point. Currently, Chernzong's strength was divided into several stages. The first stage was to use 100% of his normal strength without using any secret technique. The second stage was to use the Yin Thunder Force and combine the power of the Tao of Heart and the Tao of Sword. The third stage was to use the supreme secret technique, 9 layers slaughter. The fourth stage was to use the sword world. The fifth stage was also the last stage, to use the profound martial arts. From this point, one could see how powerful the profound martial arts were. Of course, there were differences between the two. For example, in terms of group attacks, the sword world was definitely more practical. Of course, after opening the sword world, the condensed sword light could use the profound martial art. Then, the sword world would become Chernzong's most powerful technique. Unfortunately, using the profound sense martial art consumed too much energy. With Chernzong's current cultivation, he could not use it that many times. He estimated that 3 or 4 times would be his limit. Opening the sword world also consumed a lot of energy. Using the sword world to perform the profound sense martial arts embryonic form was simply impossible. Chernzong's energy was instantly sucked dry, and he could not use it at all. Fight, fight, fight. Day after day passed. The number of disciples who received the attention of the 8th heaven experts increased. After all, some of the disciples' performance was average at the beginning, but later, they showed amazing tenacity and became more outstanding. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. I have accumulated more than 300 points. Chen Zong thought to himself. On average, Chen Zong gained about 2 points a day. In other words, 2 people were killed by Chen Zong. But in this half a year, I have died 3 times. Chen Zong said again. The first time, I was killed by the Origin Tribe's Green Nightmare Finger Technique, Aowu. The second time, I was killed by the Giant Tribe's Wang Monglia's Fist Technique, Aowu. But both of them were the last batch of true disciples. They were extremely talented, and their cultivation time was much longer than mine. Only the third time, Chen Zong's eyes could not help but reveal a touch of shock. The third time, the opponent's strength was too terrifying. That was a member of the Origin clan, a member of the Origin clan named Yun. He wasn't a true disciple of the previous batch, but a true disciple of the current batch. He was in the same batch as Chen Zong, but his strength was terrifying. The Origin race's Hui used a pair of dark gold maces and cultivated the 9 Heavens 10,000 Origin condensation technique. What shocked Chen Zong was that Hui had actually broken through the limits of the 9 Heavens 10,000 Origin condensation technique. At the Spirit Focus realm, the power of the 9 Heavens 10,000 Origin condensation technique far exceeded the first level. It seemed to have reached the second level, which was even more astonishing than the Green Nightmare. What he had comprehended was the Tao of Destruction, and he had also condensed the Great Tao Divine Glyph. In that battle, Chen Zong was extremely difficult. He was almost completely suppressed. Qing did not use any powerful martial arts at all, such as the embryonic form of the arcane martial art. Of course, Chen Zong was not sure whether the opponent had mastered the embryonic form of the arcane martial art, but he guessed that the opponent had mastered it. However, Hui relied on the pair of dark gold truncheons to continuously attack. The might of every single truncheon was extremely powerful, overbearing, and endless. It was like the combination of mountains and tsunamis, and it was terrifying to the extreme. Chen Zong opened the sword world, and the sword light was directly shattered. He used the Aowu prototype, but it could not do anything to Qi. The tyrannical sword light was still shattered by Qi's maces. In the end, he was killed by Qi with a single strike. Crushing. He had unleashed all of his strength, but against Qi he was still crushed. It was extremely terrifying. He was like a monster. Chen Zong thought. Now that he thought about it, he was still shocked. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.